watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, and welcome to The Establishing Shot, a podcast where we do deep dives into directors and their filmographies. I am your host, Eli Price, and we are on episode 64 of the podcast today. We are just kind of dipping our toes into the 90s, but I guess we're kind of dipping our toes in only to find that it's actually deeper than we thought, and we're crashing into a dinosaur-sized hole because we're covering Jurassic Park today. So very exciting. I have a returning guest. Christiaan Funkhouser is joining me again.
Hello.
You might remember him if you listened to the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade episode.
Yep.
He joined me for that. But yeah, I'm excited. This is part of my childhood, as it is many others that were born in the 80s and 90s. So yeah, it's dinosaur time, I guess.
It's dino time.
But yeah, and I just wanted to say off the bat, I definitely spared no expense. on this podcast today. Spared no expense. So I hope it sounds great and looks great, because definitely spared no expense.
Exactly.
As old John Hammond tells us multiple times throughout the movie.
Yes. That's a good point. Sorry, I'm taking notes.
But yeah, so we had just started our kind of journey into Spielberg's middle part of his career, which I guess kind of encompasses the 90s and 2000s. Yeah, started off a couple weeks ago with Hook. Enjoyed that conversation, and yeah, now we're into the second film of the 90s in Jurassic Park. So Christiaan, before we jump into all that, you did a longer intro to yourself and your intro to Spielberg in the Last Crusade episode. So if you want to hear more of that, more about Christiaan, go back and listen to the intro to that podcast. But yeah, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, what you do, and you have something called Dancing Fox Studio that you're kind of working on. So if you want to share a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Hi, my name is Christiaan Funkhouser, and I love stories, and I love storytelling, and I love, I love dinosaurs, and the Jurassic Park has to be one of my favorite movies of all time. So I was really excited. I think when Eli first was like, "Hey, I'm going to be doing Steven Spielberg," I was like, "I want to do Jurassic Park. Let me know." But yeah, Dancing Fox Studio is, I love movies, I love stories, but I find a lot of the times the people who are like reviewing them and things like that are either being like not safe for work, or they're cussing and all that other kind of stuff. And it's like, I feel kind of bad sharing that sometimes with friends and family. So I want to do something that is more wholesome, but that actually gets into looking at like the storytelling and the philosophy behind it, and sometimes theology and faith, and like how we can kind of use stories and look at stories to help us learn more about ourselves, because you've got the whole modern myth theory and all that kind of stuff. So so that's what Dancing Fox Studio is doing. Will eventually be up and running. So it's a project of it's a passion project of love that I'm working on. But it is, I'm really excited to do this. I've got my sexy Ian Malcolm back there, as well as some other dinosaurs that are here to join us. So we are, it's going to be good.
Yeah, Christiaan sent me a picture of his Funko Pops and Lego Jurassic Parky stuff he has in the background. So yeah, that was That was fun to see that. It's hilarious to me that they made like a shirt open, sexy Ian Malcolm Funko Pop.
Yes,
Just perfect.
it's so great.
um, yeah, when the camera panned in that one scene, because it'd been a little while since I'd seen Jurassic Park, and there was old Jeff Goldblum with his shirt wide open, like
Yeah,
not even like he. It reminded me of like a George Costanza pose in Seinfeld
yes,
when Kramer's like taking pictures of him. I was like, why is he laying like that,
like of
other
all
than
the
to show off
positions to
his
lay.
abs?
Yeah,
But yeah, so that's great. Great to have Christian in all of his Jurassic Park memorabilia on the
Woo.
podcast
Yeah,
today. But yeah, you shared a little bit last time of your love for Jurassic Park. So
yeah.
before we get into the depths of the making of this movie, why do you love Jurassic Park so much?
As a kid, I loved dinosaurs, still do. Um, and I remember going to, so I was 8 when Jurassic Park came out, and I remember going to the theaters to see this movie about dinosaurs, and that first scene when you go, because okay, sorry, the first one with the Velociraptors kind of like
Yeah,
you kind of like, okay, I can see what they're doing, but when you, especially back then before CGI got really good and then really bad subsequently, but
yeah.
um you go there with the and you see the brachiosaur and you're just like, holy junko. And like I had like the moment like Dr. Grant, and it was just like,
Yes.
this is crazy. And then as it goes on, and then you see the raptors, and like I remember I went to Universal Studios not too or even like 10 so years ago, or and they had the thing of the velociraptor, and I would not turn my back to it because I didn't trust it, even though I knew it wasn't real. I knew it wasn't
Yes.
doing that. I couldn't trust it at all.
Yeah, it could be a raptor tactic, stand really
Exactly.
still, you know. So you never know.
They're very clever.
Yes. But yeah, that's awesome. Let me ask you this, because this
Yeah.
is true of me. I guess like I kind of, my memory is like fifth grade. I was like, I really want to be a paleontologist.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
So did I.
So it's part of both of our childhoods of like paleontologists for the "what do you want to be when you grow up" question. Which
Absolutely.
is,
And
I actually read that there was like a significant like uptick in people like declaring paleontology majors after this movie in
interesting.
like college and stuff. So I don't know how many those people actually like followed through, but
Right.
yeah, I did hear that there was like a resurgence in the field after this movie.
That's crazy. Oh, and it's one of those things that like, and we'll get into it obviously, but it's just one of those things where like it's there's just enough like fiction, but also there's a decent amount of science with it. So it kind of is that science fiction.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, could we actually get to this point? And then what if we just fix the problems that they did? And let's
Yes.
not use amphibian DNA.
Yes.
And then we got this. We'll be good.
Yeah. Yeah, not use amphibian DNA, not have one singular erratic dude do all the
Yeah,
computer programming for the entire park.
exactly.
Yeah, that's like, I feel like that's like one of the main things that like doesn't hold up is like, okay, come on. Like this is a team of like 40 dudes. Like there's
Right.
no way one dude is doing all of the programming.
Not at all. And that's the one area where he did spare an expense,
Yep.
apparently. According to Ninja, anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, let's jump into it. Let's go back to the late 60s where Steven Spielberg is 23 years old, beginning his TV career at Universal. And
Wow.
Michael Crichton, the author of the book Jurassic Park, is
Yep.
a mere 27 years old and has just sold the rights to his first bestseller, The Andromeda Strain, which became a movie in 1971. And yeah, Spielberg was assigned to kind of show Michael Crichton around the studio at Universal. And they kind
Interesting.
of hit it off and became friends, and I guess kind of kept up with each other after that. So they were both kind of like young, getting started in the game, and became friends, which is really cool.
It is.
So fast forward 20 years, and Michael Crichton has this 150-page script set in a Chicago hospital emergency room called Code Blue. He's trying to get people in Hollywood to pursue his script, and nobody's really going for it. But he gives it to his buddy Spielberg, and Spielberg really likes it. And they don't do anything with it then. Spoiler alert, it does eventually get made into a series called ER. So Amblin produced that television series, which was very popular. I've never watched any ER. Have you ever watched?
I have
any
not
ER?
either.
Yeah, me either. I wonder. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's like up my alley. So, and I don't watch much
I think it
TV
was
shows. So
more like a drama than
yeah,
like with House or
right.
The Good Doctor, stuff like that, where there's more of a kind of like a gimmick type thing.
Yeah, that sounds
So
right.
I think it paved the way for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but amidst that conversation, Spielberg was like, hey, what else are you working on? And Crichton kind of like, I guess like even a little reluctantly was like started telling him about this dinosaur book that he was writing. And Spielberg listens to the idea, and Spielberg's just like, okay, it's inevitable that I want to make this into a movie right there. Just hearing the concept.
Such a cool concept.
And they kind of agreed, like, okay, we need to make this into a film.
Yeah.
And so in May of 1990, months before the book was actually published, I think it was published in October of that year, Crichton's agent sends Jurassic Park the manuscript to a bunch of studios, and they actually get offers from 4 studios. So I think all of them were putting up $1.5 million to buy the rights for the book.
Yeah.
And so you have offers from Columbia Pictures, TriStar, from Warner Brothers, from 20th Century Fox, and from Universal, who eventually won the bid with Amblin as the production company and Spielberg as the director. So they they give him all of those studios kind of had production companies and directors that were part of their proposals. So I thought this was interesting. So the other 3 directors that were proposed were Joe Dante, who is probably most popular from Gremlins, which Spielberg produced. Richard Donner was one of them, who did Superman, the 70s Superman movie, amongst that's the one that comes to mind. I know he's done other popular stuff, but that's the one that comes to mind for me. And the other one was Tim Burton, which would have been really, I don't know what kind of movie that would have been.
That would have been so weird.
Yes, I agree. I think Joe Dante's would have been like way more like dark. I'm not sure what Richard Donner might have had a similar tone to Spielberg, probably, I would think. And Tim Burton's would have just been weird.
Yes, you would have had like random dinosaurs that are like walking, and well, so let's see. Around that time, Edward Scissorhands had already come out.
Yeah.
Men in Black hadn't.
No,
Tim Burton didn't do Men in Black.
No, he didn't.
No, that was anyway.
Spielberg produced Men in Black. Scissorhands was out. Batman was out at this point.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It seems like something else. Maybe Beetlejuice. I think Beetlejuice
sounds about right.
Yeah, I think Beetlejuice was late '80s too.
But I think like So I think Joe Dante would have made it more of a horror movie. Donner
Yeah.
might have made it more of guy saves the day. I think more so. Just kind of depending. And then
I don't know what
Burton
Tim
would have
Burton would have
done
done.
Burton things.
Yeah.
It would have been a very unique movie.
It would have been
be sure.
interesting to see that.
Yeah.
But alas, we didn't get those movies. We got the Spielberg version. Universal gave Michael Crichton $1.5 million for the rights and another $500,000 to write the screen adaptation for it. So he comes away with $2 million for this, which I'm sure not all of that goes to him. I'm sure like agents get some and
For sure.
whatever, assistants. Got to pay your assistants and
You
all
do.
that. But that's still a heck of a lot of money,
especially back in the 90s.
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting. The fact that, and we talked about this briefly, the thing that you actually had the author of the book, who was the one that was helping writing the screenplay. A lot of times the source material or the person who originates it doesn't do it. And when they get away
just
from
kind of
it,
consult usually.
Yeah.
And
then when they get away from it, then that's where it really starts to derivate from things like Star Wars after Lucas is very different than Star Wars with Lucas, as an example. Not to say it's necessarily bad, but it's different.
Right.
Because you have different people doing things. And so I think having him actually write the screenplay when it was the initial screenplay, while it was so new and fresh and what stuff, I think that really set an important direction.
Yeah. Yeah, and it probably helps a lot that he had like screenwriting experience already. He had done a movie called Westworld 1973 that he wrote and directed actually. And he had some other movies in the 80s too that he wrote and directed. So he was an author, but he also was like a Hollywood guy too. Like he was plugged in and working in Hollywood. So that probably helps a lot. So he has a writing credit. He wrote the first draft. I don't know how much of that draft ended up being the movie. I know he wrote a first draft. The lady I think it's a woman that wrote Hook, that wrote or co-wrote, I can't remember. Hook, she did kind of a rewrite of his first draft. Her name is Malia Scotch Marmo. So she did kind of a rewrite of his draft. And then, so after those two drafts, Spielberg wasn't really satisfied with the way they were turning out. And so, he brought in David Koepp. And David Koepp has written other things with Spielberg since then. Like he also writes The Lost World. He does War of the Worlds, Crystal Skull. And he also was a writer for Raimi's first Spider-Man movie, Mission Impossible. So he has some big movies that he's been a part of. But yeah, he brings on David Koepp, and working with Spielberg on this, because Spielberg's the idea man, and I think he kind of learned early on that it's best if he doesn't write the screenplay for his movies, but brings in a good writer to write his screenplays for him. So he works with Koepp. They really try to respect the general plot of the novel. They opt for an open-ended ending, which the novel has as well. I will say one of the big things, and we'll get more into the differences between the book and the movie probably later on after we talk about all the production stuff. But they do make Hammond like a much more sympathetic character. He's kind of like, he's almost made into like a Spielberg stand-in, this kind of adult that has like, that's very like, has childlike wonder with like the means to satisfy his whims sort of thing. And that's kind of like how Spielberg has been viewed for a lot of his career. And you know, there's a lot of truth to that. If you look at the movies he makes, it's like they're very like childlike wonder, but like if you gave that child the means to like put that out there, you know.
Yeah. That's a very interesting kind of like idea with it, because you get the Indiana Jones, and it's that childlike wonder of I'm going to be an explorer
Mm-hmm.
and do that kind of stuff, and then you do the ET, and it's like, what if there's an alien?
Yeah.
And
What if I could be friends with an alien? Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
ooh, that's an intriguing thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, they have less people die in the movie too than the book.
Yes.
We have what I would say three major deaths, and three deaths of like major characters. That you have the death of
Yeah.
the like worker at the very beginning, but you don't know who he
Oh
is.
yeah. Yep.
And so it's kind of like, you know, we don't really count that guy, I guess,
Choo-choo.
unfortunately. Yes. But yeah, especially so. I don't know. I guess I wonder if I should spoil the book. Because this is definitely like a movie spoiler podcast, but we are gonna have to get into the differences. So I guess I will.
Well,
so.
I think they've
But-
had what is it, 35 years or so?
Yeah, they've had a while to read the book.
Yeah.
I just read it earlier this year, so. Yeah, I've been kind of reading all of the books that Spielberg's adapted.
Mhm.
So I actually just finished The Lost World, also. So, I've read both of those before getting
Yeah.
into these recordings. So, but yeah, in the book, Hammond and Malcolm die, which the Malcolm thing is another thing I guess we'll get into for the Lost World episode.
Yeah.
Have you read The Lost World, the book?
I have.
Yeah, so you know what I mean when I say that.
Yeah.
But so I won't spoil that. I'll save that for them. But yeah, in the book, as far as you know, Hammond definitely dies and Malcolm dies too. But yeah, and David Koepp, another thing he does is he adds. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And then Molden lives. They kind of swap out the characters.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that is another guy that dies in the movie that I wasn't counting before. That would be 4.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I guess we'll get into it later, but the way that Hammond dies is very different than the way that some of the other characters die.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so
in the book.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah, thanks for clarifying for maybe someone that didn't know what you meant. David Koepp also adds a lot of like kind of wit and it just kind of lightens up the tone for the screenplay a lot. He's because the movie ends up being like it has a lot of like pretty funny moments too.
Really good. There's great chemistry.
To lighten stuff up. So, which Spielberg felt was important. He felt like it was he's the kind of director that wants a wider audience. He's not interested in like making a movie that like, oh, only certain people are going to want to watch this. No, he wants to make movies that everybody wants to see.
And it makes sense.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different. I don't mean to say that as if it's a bad thing. But yeah,
he also doesn't like. You can tell that he wasn't just like, okay, we have a checklist of all the groups we want to do. We're going to do this for this person and this for this person.
Yeah,
and
sure.
This for this. It's just like it's almost like Tolkienian in a way, where we're going to do this for the everyman type, everyman type person, where it's everyone can find themselves in some way in something, as opposed to like we're going to segment and then make it, and because that when you make it for everyone like that, where it's segmented and stuff like that, then it's for no one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But then Spielberg can do it, and it makes sense, and then it's enduring. Which is why we're talking about him now and not somebody else,
right?
Or other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, that's kind of the writing of the screenplay, but the main challenge really wasn't the writing, but making the dinosaurs. And so they had to start getting getting into that pretty early on, thinking about what they were going to do. Actually watched like a behind the scenes kind of footage of Spielberg and some of the visual effects guys. They were just like sitting around the table with a couple of models, just like they were just talking about like, what would a dinosaur do? How would it move? How would a velociraptor look around? They're just like, yeah.
Interesting.
It seems like they were just been doing that for hours, just talking about like the details of what they were going to make and how it would function. So they did have 3 consultants, like scientific consultants. 2 were paleontologists, Jack Horner and Robert Backer, and one was kind of like a dinosaur science popularizer named Don Lessem. So those were kind of the 3 consultants. They advised the special effects teams along with Spielberg. And Jack Horner, I think, was the main advisor from what I could tell. He was the main like consultant for the movie. He was a paleontologist. His big discovery was in 1979. I didn't write down the dinosaur, but it wasn't one I recognized.
Is
anyway.
it it's like Archaeopteryx or something like?
No, it started with an M. It was like,
oh
yeah, I didn't recognize it at all. But he
did
did
dinosaurs.
He did discover one, and he was a big proponent of like theorizing about dinosaurs being closer relatives to birds than reptiles. He was like a big proponent of that theory. And so Jack Horner actually kind of became the model for Grant in both the novel and the book, really.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then the film too also kind of has allusions to the Backer and Horner kind of had some scientific disagreements on dinosaurs, and that kind of comes up a little bit in the movie with the kid being like, "I read this thing from Backer."
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they even like pull that into the the dialogue there, which
that was
is
such
fun.
a great like. We're like, his book was this big, and yours was only this big.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you kind of are like, okay, like you need to be nicer to the kid, but also like I kind of get it. He's like hovering.
Yeah.
But yeah, so despite all the consultants, there's definitely like factual errors.
Yeah.
The recovery of old DNA is like it's a really good sounding idea, but I don't think the science holds up for that.
Not
at all. Colors and sounds of dinosaurs didn't match like the best scientific theories of the time. They just kind of like made them look and sound how they wanted to. The T-Rex probably not that fast.
Let's go faster.
The whole like rough and venom spitting of the Dilophosaurus was like totally made up. So, there's just a bunch of that kind of stuff, and I think even like velociraptors actually aren't like that big either. They're like,
I think they were like
turkey size, I think, is what I've heard.
And they can't open doors. I will say,
as far as we know.
Well, this is true. I guess we can't go back.
We can't know unless we recreate them.
It sounds like a great idea. It wasn't until like 3 years ago that I replaced the doorknobs like all throughout the inside of the house.
Mm-hmm.
We got the kind that has a little bar in there so the raptors could open. I would not buy those up until 3 years ago because I was afraid of raptors getting in. Like if they were to come around, they could get into my house. And I was like, we cannot do that.
Yeah. It feels like it would be easier for zombies to open handle doors than knob doors too.
That's a good point.
If there's ever a zombie apocalypse,
zombies, dinosaurs,
zombies, they can just lean against the handle and it'll open, on accident.
That's terrible.
It'd be harder for them to turn a knob,
Yeah, because you gotta have the grip strength.
Yeah, you kind of have to know what you're doing.
The other thing as you were talking about they couldn't really, you can't really consult dinosaurs. I was thinking about, I remember watching like a remaking or a making of The Lion King, and how there's that one scene where like Scar's walking on the cliff, and you kind of see his shoulders move like that. And they were talking about how they would watch lions and whatnot walking on there, and they animated that to be able to mirror what it was like in real life. And so they can't do that with dinosaurs. So we've got to just guess that when the raptor goes to attack, it kind of, goes back and has its fingers out like that, or that the T-Rex would use its head to grab things and like knock things over. And so it's so that's an interesting thing I hadn't thought of until like just now, practically.
Yeah, and we'll talk probably a little bit more about that when we talk about like the special effects teams and how they kind of made the movements and stuff like that, which is really interesting. I did write down this quote from Jack Horner, the paleontologist. He said, basically, I was there to make sure that sixth graders didn't send him nasty letters about something being wrong. So it's like, I'm not there to like be like everything has to be 100% lining up with the best theories. It's like, no, we're just here to make sure that, like, one of the big things that he said absolutely not to was some of the original like animatics that they had of the raptors had the raptors like having like a little lizard tongue come out, like snake lizard tongue. And he was like, absolutely not. They did not have those. You cannot put that in the movie. And so they're like, oh, okay, I guess we'll take that out.
Well, and it makes it more like scary almost if it's just like has its little, nose and is sniffing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Other major influences for Spielberg, from his childhood were the movies The Lost World from 1925, which was like the first time dinosaurs were ever on the big screen.
Oh, that movie.
Yeah. So this like stop motion,
Yeah, with the not claymation, but I guess kind of that stop motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that and then King Kong, of course, 1933. You've got the Kong versus the T-Rex kind of fight.
Yes.
In that movie. So those were big inspirations for Spielberg, and he really wanted one of his goals for this movie was, all of those had dinosaurs, and it was like fun to see them on the big screen. Yeah. But one thing that was still missing in in movies was dinosaurs and humans inhabiting the same space.
Interesting.
And in a like realistic way,
Yeah.
And so that was like the next level that he wanted to take things to. And he talked about, he also had a childhood love of dinosaurs. And his big thing along with, what I just said was, he didn't want this to be like a movie dealing with like monsters or horror. That wasn't his goal. What he wanted was, he wanted it to be like a real look at bringing dinosaurs back alongside humans. That was like what he wanted. And so, that's why you hear things like in the movie, like, that they're just, that's what they do. They're dinosaurs,
Yeah. Or like when Grant is by the Triceratops and he just is like leaning on it as it's breathing and he's going back and forth.
Yeah, it makes it feel very real. It's just a sick animal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a big old boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so or girl actually.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of poop.
Which I noticed in the movie they kept saying he for the T-Rex, and I'm like, it's not a he. It's they already told you they're all girls.
Yeah.
Which,
Hi. Quick reminder that you, yes, you, can be a huge help to the production of this show. If you visit establishingshotpod.com/donate, you'll find out how to join the Establishing Shot family through some giving tiers starting as low as $5 a month. You heard that right, only $5 a month. And not only will you be helping me keep the show going, but you'll also get some perks yourself, like early and ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, access to a Discord server where we can chat it up about the show and movies in general, and more. Might even let you choose a movie for me to review for the show. Check out that link in the show notes to learn more. Back to the show.
But yeah, so we can go through the crew
Sure.
that worked on the movie. Kind of roll through these. Kathleen Kennedy and Gerald R. Molan were the producers. The talked about this a little bit. The adaptation of the story by Michael Crichton and Malia Scotch-Marmo.
Yep.
And then the screenplay was written by David Koepp. Michael Crichton has screenplay credit too, but I think that's just them giving credit where credit's due because he wrote the original story.
That's fair.
But yeah, I kind of mentioned some other things David Koepp has written, but the director of photography or cinematographer, pick your whatever term you like best, is Dean Cundey. He had just worked with Spielberg on Hook, and he also worked some things he had done in the past. He did the Back to the Futures. He worked on he was a cinematographer for The Thing and Halloween, so you kind of have some horror background there.
Yep.
And he went on to do Apollo 13 too, which I thought was interesting.
Now for something completely different.
Yeah. So yeah, Dean Cundey, I think he did a really good job on this with the cinematography. But
because there are a lot of like scenes, like so. Me, I briefly looked over the show notes and everything because part of it I want to like learn as you're going along. But now that I see that, it kind of makes sense because there are some like really good shots that are very horror like, but like I think the or situations that are very like creepy, especially with the kids in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That whole section, it's like it screams, but it's not like over the top horror. It's just like, but you have that suspense of like even like walking through with the click as it's going. I don't know why my hands are so animated today, but walking through with the click on the thing, or even the one where they're charging for and she's trying to shut it.
Oh yeah,
just like scream, and then it ends up being a reflection, which is like I'd forgotten about that one.
Yeah.
So it's so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't over the top horror. It was just, but they really took advantage of the suspense.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of dark, night scenes too, which the Thing is like almost exclusively at night. So,
you're right.
And so he had a lot of experience with that, which The Thing is a great looking movie too. If you've never seen it. Also very gross at points, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes. I will say, and they did a really good job at night, and this we might get into this later on, but like you can tell that he loves using sound stages, but they're able to have like that's just kind of a Spielberg-esque thing. And then anyway, whatever.
Yeah, there's a good mix of location and soundstage shooting, but and we'll definitely talk about that real soon, I think.
Okay.
Moving
but
along.
Just so the lighting, the dark scenes were dark, but you could still see.
Right.
And so I think that also speaks to Dean.
Yeah.
Cundley's and his experience working in like dark movies and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because Halloween, the same thing, his Spielberg's faithful and true editor, Michael Kahn, is faithful and true composer, and John Williams. Don't really need to say anything about either of them. They're I mentioned their name every episode, it feels like. The sound was done by Rob Judkins. He did Hook with Spielberg, so he was another one coming off of Hook with Spielberg. And he went on to do a bunch of more movies with Spielberg as well. And then the sound effects editing was done by Richard Hims and Gary Rydstrom. They had done some work with Spielberg before as well. In fact, I think they were Last Crusade guys. So I think
sounds familiar.
Yeah. The production design was done by Rick Carter. So he had worked with Spielberg on his Amazing Stories series a lot. So brought him on from that. He also had done the production design for The Goonies. And so, which Spielberg produced, and worked on the story for. So that's
Yeah.
kind of his connection there. He went on to do more Spielberg after this too. So this is kind of a common theme here. These guys, a lot of these guys go on to work with him on a lot of like his upcoming like 90s and 2000s movies. So we'll be probably hearing these names again. Art direction was done by John Bell and William James Teagarden, which is a great last name.
That's fantastic last name.
He did Back to the Future 2 and 3, so there's a connection with Spielberg, and he goes on to do a few other Spielberg movies. So, mechanical special effects was Michael Lantieri. He'll go on to do The Terminal with Spielberg, and then he actually did stuff. He did work on Jurassic World as well,
Woo!
which is fun. The dinosaur models were done by Stan Winston, who worked on some notable things he's done: Terminator 2 and Iron Man. He did stuff for Iron Man, which is cool.
Interesting.
Yep. Visual effects, two main guys in that team. Phil Tippett. He worked on some Star Wars stuff, Temple of Doom, RoboCop. And Dennis Muren is the other guy. He worked on E.T. He worked on Terminator 2. He worked on Temple of Doom. Both of those guys are, especially Dennis Muren is an ILM guy, which is George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic. They're kind of special effects. What would you call it? I guess special effects studio.
Yeah.
And Phil Tippett.
And you can tell because it was done really well.
Oh yeah.
It was done like. It was very excellent in the way that it was done. You could tell that they put a lot of time, effort into it. It wasn't just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why even though it's kind of aged a little bit, it's still enduring.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and we'll spend a good bit of time talking about all that. And Phil Tippett he was like a very like well-respected guy in kind of doing models and stop motion. And all that kind of stuff. I actually just watched a movie that he made, a stop motion movie called Mad God. I think it came out a few years ago. But he worked on that movie for like, I want to say like 30 years. It's a stop motion animated movie about this. It's hard to describe. It's like this guy is like descending into this underworld kind of thing, and it's just like full of like really interesting, weird, creepy images. It's really and just like it's worth watching just because like it's so well crafted. Just like looks incredible. So that's a shout out to Phil Tippett for that. He deserves a shout out for that 30 years of work. And then Dennis Muren, he's a really interesting guy. He really forward thinking special effects guy. I actually listened to there's a podcast called Team Deakins, which is I don't know if you've ever listened to that. It's Richard Deakins and his wife. Can't think of her first name. They co-host it. And Deakins, he's considered one of the best working cinematographers. He's done some amazing cinematography work. But they just have people that work in Hollywood on and do an interview and ask them about their life and their career and stuff. So there's a really good episode with Dennis Muren that I listened to that I recommend. So he kind of talks about some of his work on Jurassic Park in that episode. So, and then other stuff he's done. It's a really, really interesting interview. And yeah, that podcast is just good. If you're like, oh, I want to hear what this guy has to say. But they have like, he's a special effects guy. They also they'll have directors or writers or cinematographers or actors. They have like basically all the people on. So,
Podcast.
Yeah, that's kind of the crew. Let's run through the cast. Spielberg before we jump into the names, Spielberg didn't want huge movie stars for this. He kind of talked about that in one of the making of documentaries. He what he wanted was he felt like a big movie star would kind of distract from what he was wanting to do with the movie. It would be like they're the focus instead of the dinosaurs and the characters. So he got just really solid actors that were probably more like relatable to the everyday person.
Kind of like what Lucas did with Han Solo, or Harrison Ford played Han Solo. Like he wasn't famous, but he was reliable. He was there.
Really, all those characters are like that. None of those characters were big movie stars, you know.
And because I think it also adds to the realisticness of it. Because if you had, let's say, I don't know, Brad Pitt as a paleontologist, like, that's not really all that believable. But someone like Sam Neill, it makes sense. Nothing against Sam Neill, but he's a lot more.
He's more relatable. He's
more of a real person, I guess.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. And that's exactly what Spielberg was going for. So, Sam Neill does play Grant, Dr. Grant, and this role was also offered to John Hurt, which would have been interesting, and also Tim Robbins was also considered. But they ended up going with Sam Neill. Sam Neill was born in Ireland and raised in New Zealand. And he, for the movie, he actually had tried to develop like an American accent, and it wasn't very good. So I guess Spielberg let him just kind of like, he doesn't sound like full on like New Zealand accent. But he also doesn't sound American. So Spielberg just kind of let him like do something in between, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, he had just been in The Hunt for Red October, which was a big movie in 1990. Sure. And Sam Neill shadowed Jack Horner for a bit, to kind of prepare for the role, which I thought was pretty cool.
And that totally makes sense too.
Yeah. I'm sure that was interesting for him. Laura Dern plays Ellie Sattler. Laura Dern is, I feel like, such an underrated actress. She is so good in everything I've ever seen her in. But she was discovered by David Lynch. She was in a couple of his movies, Blue Velvet in '86 and Wild at Heart in 1990, which I've seen that one. I've seen Wild at Heart. She co-stars with Nick Cage in it. It's a pretty wild movie, which is in the title. So, she had just come off an Oscar nomination for the movie Rambling Rose in 1991, which I don't know anything about.
No, me either.
But she was one of those actresses that's more like, well, let me work with these more like independent directors. But she had been considered for this role, and Nick Cage, who co-starred with her in Wild at Heart, really like pushed her. He was like, "No, you got to be in this movie. It's Steven Spielberg, and there's dinosaurs. Like, you got to take this role." Which, way to go, Nick Cage!
Go Nick Cage! Woo!
Yeah, another reason to love him.
Yes.
But yeah, the role was also offered to Gwyneth Paltrow, which that would have been weird because she was really young at the time. And
it would have been very weird.
That would have been a weird dynamic, I think, with Sam Neill. And also, like, how was she already like so advanced in her field when she's like in her low 20s? She should still be in grad school, you know?
She's a child prodigy.
Yeah.
Was digging up her first bones at the age of 12.
I guess so. But yeah, so Gwyneth Paltrow was offered the role. Helen Hunt, that could have been good.
I could see her doing that.
Yeah. Juliette Binoche would have been interesting too. And, you know, I really, really like Laura Dern in this role though. She's fantastic.
And she was really able to kind of hit that balance of, I'm strong and capable, but I'm also there are times where she's weak, and there are times so she's hit that whole gamut
Mm-hmm.
of emotions and acting and that whole range.
Yeah,
To
very
where
complex
yes, and she did a really good job of doing everything well.
Yeah, in both the way she's written and how Laura Dern like acts the role. Is
Yeah.
very like complex character. Not you can't pin her down, which that always makes for a great character when it's not like, oh, this is this character that fits this archetype.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
and
like
so,
it was believable when they're in the cars and she's talking with Dr. Malcolm, and like she's like, he does the little water thing, and she's like, Grant, look at this, have you ever seen about this? And it was like, boom. So she's really like almost got that childlike wonder, and then almost in the very next one, she's like, oh, hey, hold up, let me get out of the car, and then she's in
she's taking
scientist
charge.
mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Which that leads us to Jeff Goldblum, who plays
Woo!
Ian Malcolm. Ian Malcolm, interesting character. One interesting thing is Jim Carrey actually asked to audition for Ian Malcolm, which would have been I don't know, that would have been different.
I think it would have.
Yeah, the studio though stuck with their initial vision, which was Jeff Goldblum, and I think that's good.
That was the best.
Yeah,
because you get the beautiful shirt down thing. You also get his glorious laugh.
Yes, I love the way his line readings make it feel like he's improving it on the spot, because he does a lot of like stuttering and like and stuff, and he's kind of like talking like this, and he makes it feel like he's actually like coming up with these lines when he's really just doing a really good line reading of the script.
Right.
And yeah, I love that about what Goldblum does there.
And he was really a lot like I think casting just overall was fantastic things, but he had the job of being that straight man, but then also the guy who was questioning things, but then also kind of the comic relief. And he was able to do it all, and then also be cool while doing it. Like there's not very people who can be very cool walking up to because I think he's like 6'6" or something like maybe 6'4".
I didn't realize he was that tall.
To go up to a 7-foot pile of poop and then just iconic roles, but then also do his laugh, and but that it totally fit the character, and I don't really know of anyone else who could have pulled it off in the same way.
No, it wouldn't have been the same with anyone else. It could have been different and still good with someone else, but it wouldn't have been the same exactly.
Yeah.
I think you're right there for sure. I did read at one point that Spielberg almost cut this character, and I'm glad he didn't.
Same.
Yeah. Moving on, Richard Attenborough plays John Hammond. So he must have really liked Spielberg, because Attenborough had actually suspended his acting career in 1979 to focus on directing. And so this is his first acting role since 1979.
Wow.
Yeah. Which he did have kind of a special bond with Spielberg. And in fact, in 1983, Attenborough won the DGA, which is the Directors Guild Awards. He won the Best Director for Gandhi, which he directed. But before the awards, he was like talking with Spielberg, and he was like, "Oh, it's locked in. You're gonna win for E.T." And then he ended up winning. So he actually he was convinced that Spielberg was gonna win directing for E.T. So they had a kind of a special bond. They had a big, great respect for each other. And so Attenborough was actually asked to direct Hook before Spielberg, but he was working on the movie Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr. at the time. And so Spielberg ended up directing Hook. That's another little connection there.
That would have been a very interesting. I think it would have been very different.
It could have been, yeah.
Attenborough instead of Spielberg.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. But I did like Attenborough in this movie. He does there's a couple of like his line reading of like "Welcome to Jurassic Park" is like
Yes.
great. It's iconic, But other than that, there's not like a ton of like, oh, he's really knocking it out of the park. He's just kind of doing a solid job with his role.
That's fair.
He's not like a standout performance, but he does have a couple of like great line readings, like "Welcome to Jurassic Park." Like the little pause is so great.
It's very like almost Shakespearean in a way. I think the other thing, the line that there were two of the ones that really stick. Well, three. Anyway, we'll just go with the two. It was the we have a T-Rex.
Yeah.
And then that one is he's like that grandpa who was really excited to tell the kids, that thing. And then I think the other one is when they're eating all together, and he's like, "I brought you guys here to defend me, and the only one on my side is the blood-sucking lawyer." Like it was really good, like exasperation and he was incredulous.
Yeah.
About the thing, and he really got that across in a way that still allowed him to be the lovable grandpa type character that looks like Spielberg wanted him to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I enjoyed him for sure. Some other names: Bob Peck plays Muldoon. Martin Ferraro plays Gennaro. B.D. Wong plays Wu, Dr. Wu. You have Gerald R. Molin, not with a D, plays Harding, who was, as you may remember, was one of the producers of the movie. So he played the Harding, which is the guy that's with the Triceratops, the Triceratops.
Yes. Okay.
So he's one of the producers also. Miguel Sandoval plays Rustagno, which I think is the Amber Mines guy.
Okay, yeah, and he looks familiar too.
Yeah, I think there's a few guys that are kind of like that guys, which is like, you don't ever remember their name, but you see them in everything. Cameron Thor plays Dodgson.
We got Dodgson.
Yeah,
nobody cares.
The kids were Joseph Mazzello as Tim and Ariana Richards as Lex. Ariana Richards didn't have a ton of a career after this, but Joseph Mazzello has been in a good bit of stuff since Jurassic Park. He's let me see if I can pull up. He was in The Social Network, Bohemian Rhapsody. Those are kind of more recent ones that he's been in. He was in the Pacific, the miniseries. So he's done some TV work too. But yeah, he's been working. I don't know that he's been anything in super. I guess Bohemian Rhapsody was like 5-6 years ago at this point. So
yeah, I think it was pre-COVID.
I don't know that he's been in much since then, but yeah, he's done some work in recent years. So
they did a good job. Like, I know that they're older, but I didn't feel as annoyed as I did with Hot Pie, in Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
So
Kiwi
I feel
Kwong.
like. So what?
Short Round, is that who you're talking about?
Short Round. Sorry, I was thinking Pot Pie. Anyway, because I'm hungry. But yeah, because like I think in many ways Spielberg kind of learned how to direct kids better, so that it wasn't just, oh, these people are here making issues and problems. They were characters who were part of the thing, and that played a role as well.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool, that they weren't just like there to create problems or to hamper the heroes. They were their own characters. And but Spielberg, they also weren't like adults, like kids who were playing adults who were supposed to be kids. Right. It happens a lot of times. They were kids with flaws, and there's a lot of good foreshadowing too.
They act like kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there in some of the making of docs, Richards, who plays Lex, she kind of talks about how Spielberg would like hang out and play with them on set, and then he would kind of like, in the midst of them like playing around and hanging out, throw out questions about like the next scene or scenarios for the next scene.
Interesting.
And so it's kind of like, I guess her, in hindsight looking back, was kind of thinking about how, oh, he was like warming us up and getting us comfortable so that we would be like ready to like jump in, and be like be like loosened up and not like tense, and then he would like, he didn't just like walk up to them and be like, here's what you're gonna do. He like played with them and like showed them like, oh, like I care about you, you know. And
he's a personal, in his personal life, he had a divorce,
Mhm.
right? Because he was just getting over that in the Last Crusade, or about to just start it, or something like that.
Right.
And so he was, and he's a dad, right? Or was a dad at that point. Yeah, so he got to use some of that parental type stuff, and he probably knew that, hey, this is how we get kids to, loosen up a little bit by actually like not just forcing them to work all the time, but playing with. That's really interesting, and then kind of getting to know.
And I think at this point he's married again, and he has another child, and I think I can't remember when they adopted a boy too, and it seems like they might have already been in that, or had him, and were going to adopt him at this point, or maybe already had. So he had a few kids at this point. But yeah, Mazzello, who played Tim, he talked about how like he trusted, like he would like trust his ideas and talk to him like he mattered. Like he would talk to him, not like, condescendingly, but like,
get over here. Yeah.
Your ideas matter too, that sort of thing. So that was cool to hear.
And I think that's evident in it because the kids were, like I mentioned before, they were believable as kids, but they also fit their characters.
Right.
It wasn't them trying to make the kids be adults, or like dumb down like stereotypes of what kids should be like at that age.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about this movie is that it feels like a rare movie that's for both adults and kids. Like it caters to both, like it caters to like the appetites of kids, like what they want to see in movies, and also like what adults want to see in movies as well. Like caters to both of those, like in a like just really well blended way. And it's really, really well crafted in that way, I think.
For sure. Because it was one like that I wanted to watch as a kid, and my parents didn't have an issue watching it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just, it didn't have that Christopher Columbus style, type thing.
Yeah.
But it also wasn't like adult level, James Cameron alien style.
Right. Yeah.
Thing. So it had
something in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Rounding out the cast, you have Samuel L. Jackson as Arnold. During this period of his career, he just had a ton of great supporting roles. It really wasn't until the next year with Pulp Fiction that he really kind of like broke out and had like, that was his game-changing role, I think. But yeah, Samuel L. Jackson, very good. I almost wonder if he like would have played this character way differently if he would have done this after Pulp Fiction. Because he's pretty subdued in this one. Like,
I had actually forgotten he was in it, and then I was rewatching it, and I was like, "Oh, Samuel! I wonder how they got him."
Yeah, no, I mean, at this point in his career, he really like he kind of probably was like that guy at that point of his career. He just would pop up in supporting roles in a ton of stuff. So,
and he has that really like hold on to your butts, very
Yeah.
like I am done with this type. He really gets that across well.
Yeah.
And I think that was also really realistic. Like the guy who's just, I am tired of all this crap.
Yeah.
I am done with it.
I think it was I can't remember if it was Sam Neill or somebody else on the crew or something. In one of the making of docs were talking about how they were like, as soon as I saw him like always with like a cigarette in his mouth, I knew he was gonna die, because the guy that's always smoking a cigarette always dies. I thought that was funny.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, last but not least, we have Wayne Knight as Nedry. Wayne, I never refer to him as Wayne Knight. I always refer to him as Newman.
Yeah.
Just
Newman or Nedry, one of the two.
But yeah.
I was like, I looked at the thing, I was like, Wayne Knight, who is the
Newman.
Nedry, yep. Nedry Newman.
Yeah. Spielberg actually discovered him in the movie Basic Instinct. He has a supporting role in that movie, and Spielberg saw him and he was like, "Oh, we got to get this guy in." And another interesting fun fact is that Nedry, throughout the movie, wears the same wardrobe as the Goonies kids. So he starts off like in the floral shirt, like Chunk. At one point, he's in the yellow raincoat. And then at one point, he's in a gray windbreaker, like Josh Brolin's character.
Yeah.
So he kind of runs the gamut of the Goonies wardrobe. I thought that was a fun little fact.
Very interesting. That is intriguing.
Easter egg, I guess, kind of thing.
And he does and I think he does a good job of being that kind of, he's the bad guy, he caused everything to happen, but you're also not like super mad at him, but you're also really annoyed at him.
Yeah.
And then you also kind of feel bad for him.
Yeah. I feel like he does a fine job with the role and the way it's written. It's if I had to pick like one part of the movie that's like the weakest, it's like that whole role and stuff. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just it feels a little bit off. It might just be the very like sitcom nature of Wayne Knight as an actor.
That's fair.
But yeah, it doesn't bother me that much. It's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if this would have been done, I don't know, I almost kind of would have wanted that role if I was doing it, to have been more serious of a character and not just kind of like a goofy dude character. I don't know, a guy that you can really like hate would have been nice in the movie.
Yeah. Well, almost if it had been someone like Dodson, because he could have that kind of more like insidious, like, why is he there?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But alas, we have Newman, and I will say this: it's pretty satisfying to see. If I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, and Newman is like the nemesis, and so it's really satisfying to see Newman get eaten up.
No, I thought I feel the worst thing for him.
Why? Like, he was taunting the dinosaur, calling it stupid. Like, he deserved it.
Well, that
he ruined everything. Like, come on.
That is, I mean, that's where like the whole thing goes. But at the very end of it, I feel bad for him because I could see myself in that position where like nothing's going right, and I'm just trying to do something, and I'm going, and then the dinosaur just happens to appear in the car. And like, it wasn't until like recently that I was able to actually, I didn't cover my eyes during, after he gets, when the little Dilophosaurus is like cooing and then flurs out his thing. Like that whole scene, even into the car, I would always close my eyes, even like up until like a couple years ago, because it was just ingrained, like, this is scary. I can't look at it. And then in the car, and then the way that they have his death, without getting too much, just and the way that he was able to just kind of, anyway, so it kind of, the way that it played into his death with his kind of being that goofy, over the top character, And with that series of events, of unfortunate events, it kind of, if they were going to have that character in there, I think the way they did it was the best.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's pretty much that's the cast, and we'll definitely get more into the characters too a little later on. Yeah, let's jump into this production stuff.
Woo!
It's it's the early '90s, so CGI is kind of in its infancy. So it wasn't really like on Spielberg's mind of like, oh, let's jump into CGI when they started this
Yeah.
movie. He and really like the CGI stuff being done. If you think about movies like The Abyss and Terminator 2, both James Cameron, which were 1989 and 1991,
Yeah.
they kind of had imaginary creatures or whatever that were CGI created. So they weren't like beholden to anatomy and the laws of physics really. So you kind of the dinosaurs had to be because
Yeah.
Spielberg's vision was for them to feel like they're inhabiting the same space as humans and beholden to the same anatomy and physics as things that are alive. So it really wasn't like on his radar when he started working on this movie that, oh, we're going to try to do CGI. We're like going to go old school. Brought Phil Tippett in, and Stan Winston to work on, the animatronics, the clay miniatures, planning on doing like the stop motion animation and with Go Motion, which was like a modified stop motion, a little bit more advanced, that Phil Tippett had developed. And so I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but I'm sure you can look up a YouTube video what Go Motion was. But if you want to go down that bunny trail on your own time, feel free. I'm sure it's very interesting. I do know one of the big ones that was used in was what's the movie called? It's like Joseph and the Argonauts, or I think I have the wrong name.
Jason
and the Argonauts. Yeah. With the little fight of the skeletons, fighting the skeletons.
Yeah.
That was like Go Motion animation. And so, yeah, he had brought those guys in to do that. They planned for, he wanted full size robotic animatronic dinosaurs that Stan Winston was to create. They did a ton of concept art. It's really cool. I'm sure you've seen a good bit of it as a Jurassic Park fan. But yeah, watching like the making of stuff and in the Blu-ray, you can kind of go in and flip through some of the concept art. It's really fun to look at all that.
It is really cool.
And they just had like a room full of like drawings and stuff when you watch the making of. It's like they were really digging deep into this.
For sure.
Yeah, it was fun too hearing Spielberg, because this animatronic T-Rex that they built was humongous. It was like I don't remember how tall it was. It was like life size. So it was built to be the same size as like if you go to a museum and there's a T-Rex, bones laid out, and how big it was. It was that big.
Wow.
And I think it weighed like 9,000 or 10,000 pounds. It was absolutely humongous. And so yeah, he made these. What they were planning on was like for anything. So obviously, anytime they were in motion, like dinosaurs in motion running or anything, they were just going to do like the Go Motion animation for that stuff, and then for everything else, they were going to do the big like animatronic robots. So think T-Rex and the Triceratops, all that sort of stuff was all going to be animatronics.
When the T-Rex and they're outside the T-Rex pen and they're in the car and you have Grant and them and the T-Rex is like looking at them and like blows in their face. To be able to do that in CGI would not have the same effect.
Right.
And so that way they were actually able to react to the giant
actual
10-foot thing,
thing.
not just a stick with a
Yeah.
tennis ball.
Yeah, and I think the Triceratops is like the best example of that. Because
Yes.
what ends up happening is, and we'll get to this as we keep going, but they do, dive into CGI, but they keep a lot of the scenes with these big animatronic robotic dinosaurs that
Yeah.
are really there on set. And what they replace this for CGI is like, instead of doing the go motion, stop motion stuff for the dinosaurs like running and stuff, they do CGI. So they really just replace that part. So you do still have like real huge life size dinosaur robots on set for this movie. But yeah, the first ILM demo of CGI was in November of 1991. They showed Spielberg these running Gallimimuses. They were just skeletons at the time. They weren't even like fully fleshed. They just showed him the concept of what they would look like running.
Yeah.
As Gallimimus skeletons, and Dennis Muren is the one that called him up. Spielberg was not like pushing to go CGI, but Dennis Muren calls him up. He's the ILM guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, I think we can do this. Let's try it." And actually in that interview, that Team Deacon's podcast interview with Muren, he talks about how one of the things that he was constantly doing in his career is he was like trying to push stuff forward. Like he was like, there's probably things that if I didn't push for it wouldn't have happened, back in the day. So this is probably an example of that. It wasn't like they were like really itching to go CGI, but he was like, let's try this. I think we can do it. And Spielberg's like, okay. Spielberg, I think, actually told him like, okay, prove it, So they start with these Gallimimuses. They eventually get to the T-Rex, and the T-Rex attacking the Gallimimuses. And it was when they were looking at the T-Rex in CGI. They were looking at it, and I think it was like Phil Tippett was there, and he was like, well, I think I'm out of a job. And Spielberg said, don't you mean extinct? And
that's great.
That's what ended up in the movie between was it Malcolm?
Oh,
yeah, Malcolm and Grant, when they're kind of walking up the steps when they're first getting there. So that little interaction between Tippett and Spielberg ended up making it into the script.
That's fantastic.
Oh yeah, love that kind of stuff. Yeah, so Tippett didn't get fired. He didn't get out of his job. He just joined Muren's team because really, like, his expertise and how motion works was still like very, very relevant and very needed. He ended up kind of being, in a way, like the CGI director for this animation team, helping them figure out how to get the motion right and all that. So, but yeah, so they start shooting in August of 1992, and they eventually wrap up in November, end of November in 1992.
I feel like that's very short.
Yeah,
especially nowadays, like that would be very short. Because like some of these movies, like they're taking like multiple years to make.
Yeah, and I've talked about this with some other people on the podcast, but the turnaround back then was way faster.
Yeah.
So they would shoot a movie over 2 or 3 months, and then it would be out like later that year. They would like shoot a movie in the summer, and then it would come out for Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah. They were just pumping movies out way. The studio schedules were way faster back then. I don't know. And I think I had talked about how I have this theory that I don't know how to prove, but that you would think, oh, they were editing film back then, and film should take longer than digital editing. Because you have to cut the film and you have to like go through all the film. But the reality is, when you're shooting on film, you you don't just like shoot anything and everything. When you're shooting digital, it's like you can shoot anything and everything. So there's just like such a tremendous amount more footage to go through in
Yeah, you have so
editing.
much more B footage.
Yeah, than you would with shooting on film. And so that's my theory, is like actually digital like extends the process because the post-production takes way longer. I don't know if that's true. I'm sure I could ask some industry people and they could tell me if it was true. I just haven't done that. So I need to find somebody to ask about that would know. So
I will also where I have some friends who do editing.
yeah.
That might be.
But yeah, really probably need someone that's done both that can like compare the process for film editing and digital editing. But yeah, they originally wanted to shoot in Costa Rica, but Spielberg was worried about the infrastructure, like having good roads and buildings and whatnot that were reliable. So he went somewhere instead that was a good second that he had worked before, which was Hawaii. They did 3 weeks of shooting in Hawaii, mostly on the island of I'm gonna try to pronounce this right, Kauai or Kauai or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, they do a lot of shooting here. They shoot the park gate, the iconic park gate, the T-Rex fence, kind of T-Rex paddock area. The amber mine is shot in Hawaii. And also like the sick triceratops is shot there. There's obviously like a lot of you have the helicopter and like all of that stuff is all of that, like kind of insert footage of landscape that you get. Jungle landscape is all shot there, obviously. The raptor enclosures thing was shot at a Limahuli Nature Preserve. Cool. I don't know where that is, but maybe someone listening does. But yeah, they do lots of like empty landscape shots because they're starting to prep for, adding in CGI later. They've kind of decided at this point that's what they're doing, and so the only thing they shot not on that island was the Gallimimus stampede. They shot that on Oahu, which is a different island. But yeah,
wonder why that was different.
It's probably I mean, the way it works is they do location scouting, so they'll go out and they'll find, and they probably just couldn't find the right landscape for that scene on that island, fair. And so they were just like, oh, let's go. They probably like asked around, and someone was like, oh, this would be perfect, and so they're like, okay, we'll go there then.
Yeah,
that's usually how it goes. But yeah, they did one of the things that when you are working with CGI, so when you're working with Go Motion, there's like these specialized cameras that you need that take a lot longer to like get out there and set up and get going. But since they had decided to go CGI, it was actually like a lot quicker process. So shooting was way quicker. They got a lot of stuff ready for that. They actually, though, had their time in Hawaii cut short. Hurricane Iniki hit on September 11th, 1992. It was a Category 5 hurricane that hit. They were, you can see in, there's in one of the making of docs, and then there's also like a little featurette about it. They talk about it. You can see them. They're all like in this hotel. There's like no power, and they're all like huddled up. And there's some footage of them going out and looking around during the eye of the storm, and yeah, it just like wrecked that island, I guess. But it hit that island like head on, I think. So they didn't get to finish shooting there. They had to cut a few things that they didn't get to shoot. I think the most notable one that they ended up not getting to shoot was Arnold's death. There was supposed to be like a scene with Arnold's death Which when I realized that made a ton of sense, because there is this sense when you watch the movie of like, okay, there's something missing. Like
Yeah.
Arnold leaves, and then all of a sudden they're like deliberating on, okay, one of us needs to go because Arnold hasn't got the job done. And there's this sense of like, okay, but what happened to Arnold? Like, why is he? And so
Yeah.
it makes sense. Like, oh, they just didn't get to shoot his death.
That's it. Because yeah, sorry, I'm
processing.
contemplating that now.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting. It also does create more suspense that we didn't see it, because
Maybe so, yeah.
For the longest time, I was fooled every time. I was also a kid. I was
With
like
the arm
8 years
thing.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the arm thing. I was like, okay, good, he's there. And then he's not there, and it's like,
Yeah.
So
I think my
it's,
wife made that same noise when she watched it. She had never seen it before, and she watched it with me. So she's not really that into like super intense movies, and so like
fair.
this for me is like not that intense at all. And
Yeah.
but for her, this is like about as much as she can handle. And so yeah, I think she made that exact noise when the severed arm came out on Laura Dern's shoulder. But yeah, so they, there was, I don't know what other scenes they didn't. That was the only one that in my research I saw they weren't able to shoot. So they leave Hawaii, they go back to California. They do a couple of days in the Mojave Desert when they get back for the excavation site. And then yeah, the rest of it's on sound stages at Universal and Warner Brothers. All the stuff with the dinosaurs, robotic dinosaurs, the night jungle scenes, all the interiors, all of that is on sound stages. They the T-Rex attack is on a soundstage. That's they like did a complete recreation of the T-Rex paddock that they had shot in Hawaii for and having the night scenes. Basically, like for all of that stuff, there's so much that can go wrong that you kind of need a more controlled environment
That's what I was thinking.
to actually like get the shots done and get them right.
Yeah.
Which the Dean Cundy kind of talks about at one point in the making of, like, there's just, you can't do it on location. You have to do it on a sound stage. Which makes total sense.
It does. It's probably a little more pricey because you have to recreate everything, but it also, you have that perfect control over lighting, over sound, over everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So getting a little bit more into the effects, the effects team was essentially like 4 major guys that we've mentioned earlier in the crew. So you have like the miniatures being made by Tippett. Those eventually get scanned and processed to help with like the design of the graphic designers.
Right.
And he ends up moving into like helping them figure out how to animate them on the computers instead of animating them with miniatures. So that's what kind of Phil Tippett oversaw. Stan Winston was like the full-size robotics guy. He did all of those models. Michael Lantieri, basically his main job was supervising all the elements on set. So he was kind of like coordinating all of the specialists. Like once they, like Stan Winston's like making the robotics and making them work, and then Lantieri's the guy that like steps in and makes sure that like that is coordinating with all the other stuff on set, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then of course Dennis Murin is like the ILM team leader. He's kind of a lot of his work is in post, ends up being in post production with the CGI stuff. So those 4 guys are like the
dream team.
Yeah. They're like, they make this thing happen, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have the big dinosaurs, the T-Rex, the Triceratops, which we've talked about. They give a much more like tangible feel to things.
Yeah. And I think like because and I mentioned before when Grant's kind of resting on the thing, like there's no way that could have happened with CGI, and that's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that made things so much more real. Like if you have Grant who said Triceratops was his favorite dinosaur back in the day, and you had a giant thing like that, I could totally see doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like I'll even like have a little dog, like little poodle, and she might lay behind my head, and I'll like lift my head up and then lay my head on like use her as a pillow,
Yeah,
and it's just something to do,
yeah,
and because it
yeah,
just and I think it gets back to the childlike, adult, but not like a childish adult, but and I think that using the animatronics, they were able to actually do that.
yeah. Yeah, one of the cool things that that kind of like sums up this like transition period between in special effects between like practical effects and CGI is something that Phil Tippett and his team helped create. They called it the DID, which was the dinosaur input device. And so he actually like they went ahead and made these little like miniature dinosaurs without like all the skin and stuff, but made them the right like size and shape models in the way that they would for doing like stop motion. So
Okay.
you have the all the like joints and stuff that you can move
Yeah.
and manipulate. And what they did was they put little they equipped those things with some sort
The little
of
sensor dot
yeah,
thing.
some sort of like sensors that like would take the motion that they would do on the little model and input that into the computer program. And so they were basically like animating the dinosaurs by like manipulating an actual physical model.
That's cool.
So the CGI, some of this, obviously that's not all of it because you can't really
Yeah.
do running necessarily that way. I guess you can if you're doing like stop motion, you would do running. So I guess you can like do some of that. But yeah, they use this like dino input device to do a lot of the motion stuff, which I thought was cool, and I thought it was like so apt as like this transition. It's like
Yeah.
it's still like a physical model, but it also like has digital sensors on it that are like inputting the motions into the computer program to help animate these dinosaur motions.
That's
So
really cool.
like yeah. Um but yeah, and one thing that they kind of learned was CGI does not make the work easier. It just
Yeah.
makes it different. You have new problems and different problems, and they're actually kind of like pioneering this. So, they don't have anything to go off of really. They're doing something that hasn't been done before. And
I wonder if that's why it is so what is it called? Because they were trying like that's why it's so enduring, I guess, for
Mhm.
the stuff is because it was like, hey, this is our first go at this. Let's make it as good as we can go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean there's stuff too. It's that like didn't work that they just like that's something that Spielberg is pretty good at is when something doesn't work, he'll just cut it.
Yeah.
Like I think they were trying to do this thing where they had the kids like on the T-Rex at some point and it
Oh
just
wow.
didn't look right. So they're like, okay, we're just not doing that.
Yeah.
They couldn't get it to look right. So yeah, they do a ton of work with like motion too. Like Phil Tippett has the animators like thinking like dinosaurs, like he gets them to do like pantomime classes, and there's even like footage of them. They recorded themselves like running around like dinosaurs to kind of like get a feel for what the motion would be like for a living thing to run in that way. And then they also like observed the movements of a ton of different animals. So there's this cool part in one of the making of docs where like they're like going back and forth between like animal footage that they watched and like the footage of the dinosaurs. The one that stood out to me is there's this footage of like a rhino running and like then like bashing its head into something beside it. And then it goes immediately to the T-Rex running beside the Jeep and like banging its head into the Jeep. So like they watched like crocodiles, lizards, giraffes, elephants, ostriches, rhinoceroses. So all these kinds of animals they kind of like used as reference points for the motions of the dinosaurs. So yeah, they
Which is, I guess, what. So it does. So they were able to kind of do what it was like the Lion King thing that I brought up before. Is that they were interesting.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking that when you said that, I was like, oh, we're gonna get to that later.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are like using real animals to kind of like inform how to make these things look like they're moving and like alive. Yeah. One of the things that really helped a ton was that Spielberg storyboarded for like most of the shots of the film. And so they even like, and then on top of that, they even did like animatics, which if you're not familiar with it, what an animatic is, it's basically like, okay, let's take this scene and do an animation of it so that we can get a good feel for like where the actors need to be, where the cameras need to be, that sort of thing. And so there's actually, you can watch full animated versions of the kitchen scene with the raptors and the T-Rex attack. It's fun. They're like little clay people. So I think there's even like some action figures at some point. It's kind of like it's not all animated in the same way necessarily. They're like doing different things for different parts of it. But yeah, the storyboards, it basically helps them to know what shots are needed. So like when they get to the kitchen, like they have this animatic to go off of. This is what we're going to shoot. This is what we're looking for.
Right.
So they're not like having to figure it out. They can go in, they can get the shots. And then in editing, you're not really having to go through a ton of stuff because you're like, this is the shot we need. Now we just need to send it off the final cut.
We just need this to look like this.
Yeah, to the CGI team to add this stuff in. And they also have the animatic to go off of. Okay, this is the dinosaur. Oh, the raptor's going to jump up on this table. We need to add that in. That sort of thing. Yeah, so they also did they also had a couple of guys in like raptor suits too. For that's in the movie some. They have these like little gadgets in there. I don't know if it was like a joystick or what to like manipulate the movements of the
with the eyes and the nose and
the tail, that sort of thing. They had like a little screen that was like right there in their face to be able to see what they were doing or going, you know. And they also had Spielberg even at one point was like the puppeteers were like the unsung heroes. So they for the huge like T-Rex, for example, there's this like team of guys that are puppeteering this thing. And they have to be like in total sync, you know, because they're all manipulating and controlling different parts of this huge T-Rex robot. And so they really have to be all in sync. They had to like rehearse these movements all together so that it looks like realistic and, you know, one part isn't moving in a way that's like out of sync with the way the rest of the dinosaur is moving, you know. But they had like a 1/5 scale dinosaur telemetry system, which is basically like this 1/5 scale model is linked with cables to the big robot. And so you have the puppeteers like moving those parts and it's controlling the big one.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things with that too is Spielberg's like, oh, we've got to have rain in this scene. It's going to make it so much better if it's raining. Well, the Stan Winston was like, this isn't made for water. And so that when you have such a huge robot like that, the calibrations are very like it's like very finely tuned in the calibrations for like the movements and the motions, and all of that is based on the weight of it. Obviously,
Oh,
and
okay.
so like you have this thing getting soaked, and so like in between shots that you see all these people like running in and like with towels and like trying to dry it off because and they even showed like there would be points where like these robots move very smoothly. It's like a
Yeah.
really, really well engineered robotics, because it really does. They move so smoothly and naturally. But when the calibration is off, there's some shots that it shows where it was too heavy from all the water, and so it starts like shaking, like it's like which was
What's
really
wrong with
funny
that
to see.
dinosaur?
That dinosaur is wet and he does not like it.
No, he does not. That's you don't think about that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Really great. Yeah, so and then you have other stuff like the lawyer being eaten off of the toilet is like half of that shot is a real stunt shot and half of it is CGI. So they actually did film him on the toilet, and they, he's attached to a cable. It's not him, the actor, it's a stunt guy, and he gets like it like launches him off of the toilet, like pulls him, up and away from the toilet. And so when they sent, basically like they have a shot of him of that, and then they have a shot of that with that same like frame, I guess, without him there. And so the CGI team just added it. Basically, when he gets pulled to a certain point and the dinosaur catches him, they actually have him, he's CGI at that point. He's not it's not like a real him anymore. It's hanging out of the T-Rex mouth. This is a CGI version. So yeah, it's really cool. Really, like they're doing
so cool
stuff.
how they do that.
They're doing stuff that's like really impressive for this time.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of details too in the movie. Like two of the things that stood out to me are like the Barbasol can is just like so great. Like, and the art guy that designed that, he said like he was trying to figure out what to do, and he was like at the store and he saw a Barbasol can and he was like, this is perfect. This is like it looks great. It's like stands out from all the other cans. And so yeah, he took it back and he was like, hey, I think we can do something with this. And she was like, great, it looks great. So that's how that ended up in the movie. I love the little like the mechanics of like how it like pops open and stuff.
Yeah.
Just like little details like that are so good. And then the other one that stands out is the water ripples in the cup when the T-Rex is coming.
Yeah.
Like Spielberg was like determined to get that in the movie. And it seems like it was like maybe Michael Lantieri that was like trying to figure out, he was like, they couldn't get it to do it. Like they were like, how are we going to get this? And he said he went home. It was like they were supposed to be shooting it the next day, and he still hadn't figured out how to get that water to ripple. But he kept telling Steven like, oh yeah, we're working on it.
We'll have it done soon.
Yeah. And so he went home and he like got out his guitar, and he had a cup of water sitting there, and he just like started plucking strings on his guitar, I guess hooked up to an amp. And there was like a certain string that when he plucked it, the vibrations, I guess, of that frequency made the water ripple. And so what they did is they rigged up that same type of guitar string, running through the Jeep under the water glass, and they were just plucking that under there to get the water to ripple, which is like so great. Like
that is so cool.
It's so fun.
And that's such an iconic like thing. Like, so knowing what's gonna happen and stuff like that, you can start to see and like look and like so notice. And then of course with John Williams, and he has like the music go along with it too. But you can see like just before Malcolm notices it, it's happening.
Oh yeah.
And it's just, and that's,
and you also have like the mirror shaking, which is great. Yeah. which I think that came from Spielberg, like called one of the special effects guys and was like, he was listening to, I think he said Earth, Wind, and Fire in his car and his mirror was shaking. And so he called them and he was like, hey, we need to have the mirror shake when the T-Rex is coming.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the sounds are incredible in this movie too. So I wanted to make sure to touch on those. The T-Rex steps, get this, are recordings of falling redwood trees. So, redwood tree getting cut down. That's
okay. I can see that.
Yeah. And then of course you have all the sounds that the T-Rex makes. Or the sounds that all the dinosaurs make are these combinations of real animal sounds. So the T-Rex is in the deep registers you have a crocodile sound and a lion sound. And they I can't remember if it was Rydstrom or it was one of those sound guys that was in the documentary a lot. And the key sound he said was actually the sound that a baby elephant made that they recorded, which is great. It's this really big blast of a sound that layered on top of those deeper sounds really makes it a full dinosaur roar. Really cool. The Dilophosaurus is a combination of, and they make a few different sounds. So one of them is a swan.
A little bit more cooing almost.
Yeah. One of them is a swan. One of them, when he opens his ruff around his neck, it's a combination of a hawk and a rattlesnake. And then they even do a howler monkey sound at one point, the whooping.
Yeah.
And then the raptors, so the T-Rex actually had more sounds than I mentioned. I think there's a dog in there. There's a bunch of sounds. The raptors had several sounds too. The two key sounds were dolphin and walrus, though. Which, if you haven't ever seen a walrus making sounds, you should look it up because it's really really cool. Walruses can make so many different sounds. And there's actually they train them to make to on command make these different sounds. So you should look it up sometime.
Now I'm thinking about seal sounds. I don't know if I've ever heard
I don't know if seals I don't know if seals can do what walruses can do, but I know for this it's like a walrus sound. And I saw I heard a video of these walruses obeying commands of they're now grumble, now bark, and now do this, and the walrus is making tons of different sounds. It's really cool. Yeah, the sound design is really incredible for this.
And if I remember right, I think the dolphin is or the raptor is a dolphin that's outside the water.
I don't know.
Or something.
I don't remember the details of it. I just know it was a dolphin noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a combination of different dolphin noises,
That's fair. Yeah.
The cool thing about it is the way he quote unquote performs these sounds is he has to go through all these sound samples that they have, and they're basically he'll find the ones he likes, and then they're registered to certain keys on his keyboard. And so to combine the sounds, you just play the keys on the keyboard like you would a chord.
But it's C.
And it combines the sounds.
Right.
You can see him do it in one of the making of. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. I guess the last major thing for the special effects and stuff is that last action set piece with the T-Rex returns.
Yes.
So originally the T-Rex was not in the script at the end. It was the raptors were written to die by the falling fossils. So one of them was going to end up in the mouth of the T-Rex fossils. And then when it hit the ground, it was just going to crunch them.
Yeah.
And I think the other one was something similar. They were basically going to get killed by the falling dinosaur fossils. Kind of ironic, I guess.
Yeah. Is that what they do in the book?
It's hard to remember. The raptors don't all die in the book.
Yeah.
There's like a whole like section where you realize that the raptors are like sneaking onto ships.
That's right.
At the end of the book, they have like this hidden nest that like exits out of a tunnel to the beach, and the raptors are like swimming out and getting onto these boats, basically. Which is what? Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, sorry. I am so glad that they did what they ended up doing, because like, and it's just that it's that like, oh, the T-Rex is bad and everything like that, and then it's like, the T-Rex has saved the day.
Yeah, and that's why the choice eventually got made. Spielberg was just like, okay, we've got to figure out a way to get the T-Rex back in here. And it's one of those things where like it totally doesn't make sense. Like, how does the T-Rex get in there? How do you not hear the T-Rex coming until he's like snapping the raptor? It doesn't make sense at all, but it sure is fun.
I don't care. It does. It's all
right.
And I think so. Like, I guess part of the way that I had kind of justified it was that they weren't doing that because that would take away from where we were at now. And like, as if the cameraman is partly in the position of the audience is focused on the raptors and hearing other sounds and stuff like that, would take away from the urgency that we're in. Like, the dire need.
Yeah, I absolutely get that, but at the same time, like, it's a T-Rex. Like, that dude is making some noise for sure. Like, he's not sneaky. He's not a sneaky guy, or she rather. See, now I'm doing it. Now I'm calling it.
You're guilty.
But yeah, at this point, they were really like getting used to shooting for CGI. Like they had the way they shot for this one. Obviously, they're doing a lot of shooting without the dinosaurs there. Like there's this big tussle with the dinosaurs and the T-Rex and the raptors. And you have the bones flying. So obviously, like when they're filming, they have, stuff set up to like fly around, and they have the bones like flying into the stairs and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's no dinosaurs there when they're actually shooting. They just have to get the stuff to break. And then they add it in. So one of the things they did, like to make sure they were shooting correctly, like in the right dimensions and with the lighting being just right, was he had like one of the guys was like running around with a on a pole, just like a cutout of the head of the T-Rex, so that they can make sure like, the T-Rex will fit in this frame and all that. So Spielberg had said in one of the making of, he said after a while we shot those things as if we'd been into CGI for 10 years. It's basically just like at that point, in those last, like, because that was the last thing they shot. They were just like, they had a really good feel of what they were doing already. So, yeah.
They had done like a trial by fire almost.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the other thing that I thought was really cool at the end of that scene was when the banner falls. And I know it's like super campy.
Oh, yeah,
but it's just
is.
such a great
but it's fun
scene at the end. It's like it throws back to the other thing, and then it's like, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, and the dinosaur and T-Rex is roaring.
Yeah,
all of it is just like, but it didn't seem, what's the term? It was very much like fan service, but it didn't seem like fan service. It wasn't like patronizing or anything like that. It was like, it was just that right amount of level of like nostalgia or whatever the case is, where it's like, this is great. I am happy about this. I'm gonna rule of cool it to be, and so I think that's something that Spielberg does a really good job of.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I like The Last Crusade, is because it's got the campy stuff, but it's not campy when he does it in the same way. It is campy, but
it fits
it's
the tone. Like
Yeah.
Because this movie, if it was like way darker, like that sort of stuff would be out of place. But
Oh, for sure.
because he's found this like kind of tightrope line to walk with the tone,
Yeah.
between like fear and fun, which is like Spielberg's thing. Like that's like he loves riding the line between fear and fun. Like he wants to scare the kids, but he doesn't want to scare them away. It's that sort of thing. Yeah, that I totally feel you on that. Uh, as far as like the cinematography and the camera work, I feel like some of these things are really important. That with the work they were doing here. So one of the things was that Spielberg insisted on having typical camera movements.
Mhm.
This is obviously like CGI, like I said, is in its infancy, and so when
Right.
you have normal camera movements, like it makes it way more difficult for the CGI because they're having to process these camera movements and how is this thing we're adding, making sure like it is the right, that it looks right, that it doesn't look like
Yeah.
out of place.
Like
And
if you have the camera that's panning this way,
yeah, how do you make
perfectly
sure?
fine for animatronics or whatever.
Yeah,
But then for the CGI, you've got to almost like re-render
yeah,
a
you've got to
new
make
thing for
sure it
each.
like
Yeah.
moves in the right way within the camera movement.
Yeah.
And like one of the and I feel like that's so important because when you watch a Spielberg movie, or really just like it doesn't even have to be Spielberg. You're watching a movie, you're expecting like the camera to do certain things, and then if every time there's like a CGI dinosaur on screen, it's just like a still camera. That starts
Yeah.
to like stand out, and you're like,
Yeah, for
okay,
sure.
now it's starting to feel fake, and it can start to take you out of the movie. And that was one reason Spielberg was like insisting, like, hey, let's figure out. He was consulting with his special effects guys, and Dennis Muren was like, yeah, I think we can do it. Like, I guess that's like Muren's MO. Yeah, I think we can do it. But yeah, so I think one of the key scenes as an example of that is for the Gallimimus Stampede.
Yeah.
Spielberg was like, I really want to do like a handheld camera, like running here, with the Neil and the kid, Sam Neill as Grant and the
Yeah.
kids running, and the Gallimimus is running around them, and the kind of handheld like running away kind of thing.
Right.
And that made it like super difficult for the CGI team. It gave them extra work, but man, does it like look right once it's finally done.
Right.
And they even figured out a way to like figure out like the camera movements and like input that into their computer graphics system so that like
Wow.
they could get the calculations just right for how things are moving within the frame. And they even like set up, there's this one thing in the making of where they have like rods attached, like these digital rods attached to the characters' faces. So because when they film it, they're like running and they'll like look up at something, but there's
Yeah.
not really anything there. And so what they did is like they made sure like they could see, okay, they're looking up right here, so we need to make sure a
Oh.
Gallimimus is like passing right
Yeah.
there that they're looking up at in that moment. So that sort of thing. So there's like all these like
That's
details.
so
It's like
cool.
you would never think of that unless you're an animator for
Yeah.
these movies.
Not at all.
Yeah, so I thought that was really cool. I think basically like breaking your directorial style is going
Mhm.
to draw attention to the artificiality of what
Yeah.
you're watching. But if you don't break your directing style and you do normal camera movements, then it doesn't like draw your attention to the thing that's like not really there. And
Yeah.
so I thought that was really cool.
And like with the when the brachiosaurs, when it does its where it goes up to get the plants
Mm-hmm.
and then lands,
Yeah.
and you hear the boom, but then the camera shakes too,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
really adds like almost realism to it, even though you wouldn't normally have a camera shake and stuff. That's bad, form and everything. But doing it at that intentional time,
Right.
and then I don't think it shakes for the T-Rexes. I think we just see other things shake.
Right.
But that first time with the brachiosaur, the camera itself shakes, which is kind of a cool way to look at it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
for him
for
to
sure.
do that, to add like, especially when you have William's score behind it and the whole thing, it just adds to it. And then you don't, yeah, that's an interesting thing. That probably didn't make it difficult for CGI, but it was just another
It's just
director's
knowing,
choice that made sense.
yeah, it's just knowing like what you want this to look like having the
Yeah.
vision. This is what I know I want to see in the final result. So here's what we need to do with the camera to make that happen. And you know, Spielberg's just like, he's a pro at this point. So
That's true.
The other thing that I think is really great about the cinematography is the framing for the human perspective. So, you know, the two big examples of that I could think of was the reveal of the Brachiosaurus. You're like looking way up at it. It's this low camera angle looking way up. And that's really important because it's putting you in the headspace of the actual characters. If you were to like reveal the Brachiosaurus in a wide shot where you can see the whole thing in shot, like it's just a normal big wide shot of the landscape with the Brachiosaurus there, like you eventually do get that wide shot of all the ones in the distance. It just wouldn't have been as awe-inspiring, but that's not what you get. You get, and on top of that, you know, you see their faces before you see the dinosaur, which I think is really, really important for keeping you grounded in like the humanity of it all, like and the emotion of it all. So you know that, and then the other one that's like a similar thing is for the Triceratops, you kind of get the camera moving through the grass like from the kid's perspective, and then you know breaking through the grass before you finally see the Triceratops there. I thought that was really cool too. It's basically like these ways to frame the camera for the human perspective.
I hadn't thought of that, but that totally makes sense. Because you kind of, man, both those are really good ideas.
Yeah,
and now we get to kind of.
The reason it's so important is because like, if you just like all of a sudden you make the cut in the edit and you see the whole dinosaur and it's, you know, it's very different from like looking up at this thing or like breaking through the grass and all of a sudden there it is. It gives you this very like emotional human perspective instead of just this dry analytical like camera observing everything's perspective, you know. Which is so important, I think, for this movie and the tone and feel that Spielberg was going for.
And then I think in the same, so you have the brachiosaurs and they're doing their thing. I don't know if we're gonna get into it, but just from the human perspective thing again, the fact that the animals are sick.
Yeah.
Like you've got the one Triceratops which is sick, and up to that point, everything had been great, and we had seen everything, or if we had seen it, type thing. And that added a human element too, because we care about this guy, and then we got the giant pile of poop. And then with the other brachiosaur, how you know Lexi starts to like trust it, and then it sneezes on her, adding that additional human element. And even down to the this might be getting into too much right now, but even down with the grinning of the raptor when it like, ha, I got it type thing. So they tried to anthropomorphize some of the animals, but then just those initial interactions made and then I think when Grant's like, you know, this is a warm-blooded, there's no way this could be like, then that also throws us in there because with the it also adds more believability. You know, and then even when Sadler is like looking at the plants, this shouldn't even exist. I don't know, like I think we can all place ourselves in those positions, and then it takes someone to, you know, turn our head or to snap us out of it, and then we're like, oh. So I think that all I think
it all adds to like the human and emotional side of things, which is great. And then, you know, we kind of talked about Cundy doing a great job with like the lighting and the all of that stuff. he talked about the kitchen was like a nightmare for lighting. He had to hang all these like black drapes and stuff because you have all these reflective surfaces and
Oh.
it's like a nightmare. And the whole like Lex in the little cabinet or whatever it was
Mhm.
thing was Spielberg just like he just like discovered that, and when he was doing his storyboards for the scene, he was like, "Oh, I can have this here, and then like it'll be a reflection. It's like a little trick," which I thought was great. And then the only other big thing was that the dinosaurs in the dark and in the rain. So having a lot of like the CGI for like the bit, like especially for like the T-Rex to happen
Yeah.
like in the dark and in the rain, really helps the CGI team because again, like it's in its infancy. Like if you're constantly having dinosaurs like in full sunlight, it's like really gonna start drawing to like the artificiality of it. So
Yeah.
the rain and the darkness kind of helps mask, I guess, some of the flaws in CGI at the time.
And I think the fact that when you rewatch it, and so I have an OLED and I've got like the 4K and all that kind of stuff, and the
Mhm.
OLEDs are very unforgiving with
Yeah.
CGI. Like you can tell the Brachiosaur is CGI,
You can, yeah.
where you can't tell. I don't really know that I ever could tell that
The
the
T-Rex.
T-Rex was CGI,
Yeah.
except for maybe at the very end.
Yeah.
But that's also during the light, so I think that makes that
Yeah.
was really clever
Mhm.
of them to do that because it does give a pass, and I wonder if that's one of the reasons. I wonder if that's why there's a lot of issues nowadays still.
Clever girl.
Yeah, and then I think that's one of the downsides of something with really high, like just in terms of viewing, something with a really high refresh rate. It can make things look like
Mhm.
sets first, so there's that like kind of graininess that film has. Was this shot on film?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, there's a graininess that film has um that is very forgiving to things like that.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
that make the movie actually look more real than some of the super digital ones where like if you've got like your 960 refresh rate where you can like, oh, they're on a TV set, you can see.
Mhm.
Versus you even set that down and like bring it lower and you're like, oh, okay, now they're on the pirate ship or whatever.
Yeah, for
So I
sure.
think that was a very it created some issues, but I also think it helped in some issues.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Hello again. Do you know how you can really support the show for free in just a few minutes or less? That's right. Just leave a rating and review on Spotify and Apple, or wherever you listen that might allow for ratings and reviews. These really help the visibility of the podcast. In fact, just hit that pause button right now and drop the review right now. And then you can get back to the show. I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay. I trust that you went and left that rating and review now. Back to the show.
Well, yeah, so they completed shooting 12 days ahead of schedule. So
Wow.
that was great. The score, this was like the only time. So Steven Spielberg, as of January 1993, he had traveled over to Poland because he was starting to shoot Schindler's List, which part of his thing with the studio was he really actually wanted to do Schindler's List right after Hook. And the studio really wanted him to do Jurassic Park first and then Schindler's List. And so he immediately like jumped into Schindler's List right out of Jurassic Park. So he's over in Poland. So he wasn't able to, this was like one of the only times he wasn't able to attend the scoring session because he was in Poland. Which is,
And I think that, and I think this speaks, well, sorry, you've, knowing that he was doing that like right afterwards, he was, of course, he rushed over that, like you mentioned, but he didn't shirk his responsibilities with Jurassic Park just to spit out something to do, which is something some Game of Thrones people should pay attention to. But I think that's, and also, I don't know. I think it was important to do Hook and then Jurassic Park and then Schindler's List because you're like, oh, it's kind of, fun, doing something deep, and then you have something that's a little more serious because Schindler's List is extremely serious.
Oh yeah.
And so I think I think this was a good kind of like, oh, I'm transitioning into something more intense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so he wasn't able to do the scoring session. He's in Poland. John Williams though, like, man, he nailed it with this score. He gave in the making of, he talks about how he really what he was going for was to invoke a sense of wonder and religiosity. He was going for like kind of a cathedral kind of feel with the score, especially for like the revealing of the dinosaurs, and anytime there was supposed to be like awe and wonder, like,
Yeah.
the
And he did so good.
He's like going for like a like really big cathedral religious kind of feel. Like he was like, I really felt like it was supposed to be like a religious experience seeing these things, and it really comes across, I feel like.
I agree. And like even if you go and listen to the Jurassic Park, soundtrack, it doesn't start off with that.
Right.
You've got that like one horn, and it just kind of like slowly builds and gets softer and then gets. And I think that at first when I would listen to it, I'd be like, let me just skip to the good part. And then now I've begun to appreciate it because it does build in the way that it does.
Yeah. Well, it builds the score so the camera's building to the reveal and the score is kind of building along with it. Because like we were talking about, you see their faces, seeing it first before you finally see it. And then the score like bursts in with like that iconic melody right at that point. So yeah, it all works in sync very well.
And then it hints to it when you're first getting to the island, and you kind of have a little bit of that score, and then once the jeeps pull up and it's like dun 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 dun, dun, like almost like Star Wars-esque, going through here. That's the religiality, or not religiality, but the regalness.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he did phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think and then we slightly touched on it. I kind of mentioned it where he does like when each time you have the stomps going, and it's that like, and like that just continues to add. And then I think but he also he also uses restraint and letting there just either be like a real like kind of silent. It wasn't like a Jaws type thing when the raptors were coming up or the dinosaur was endangering them.
Well, the T-Rex attack doesn't have any score to it. Which is, I think, important too. The absence of score is just as important as like the score itself,
for sure,
for stuff like that.
Because I think he could have done it, and I think it would have been maybe fine.
Yeah,
but I think it was better that he didn't, because that drew us into it more.
Yeah,
and I think this is really before that became kind of like the popular thing to do.
Yeah, sure.
So once again, Jurassic Park pushing all the boundaries, creating new things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So the score is being made. They're starting editing. There's like a few weeks of Spielberg works with Michael Kahn before he goes out to Poland on editing for a few weeks, putting together the final cut, because they really like needed to turn around this editing process to send the final cut to ILM so they could start working on the CGI stuff and adding that in. So Michael Kahn talks about like, well, I had to make all these cuts without the dinosaurs there, and you kind of have to just hope that you made the right cut,
Yeah.
But yeah, once they sent it to ILM, they had like 3 rooms full of computer servers to like store and process that data. And we wouldn't need that now, but they did then. Yeah, it's a long process. Like, for example, it took like 4 months to animate the T-Rex chase. Murin talks about like 2 steps in it. They first created the creature performance with like a wireframe, animated wireframe, and then they would do a full mock in the scene. And so they it took a long time to get all this done. And they even like, so like when the T-Rex is like stepping on the Jeep and the Jeep is like sliding around, the Jeep in that part is actually CGI too. So it's not the actual crushed Jeep there. There's like, they computer animated the Jeep for that part. So yeah, it's a lot of work. But Spielberg's in Poland too at this point, so he's having to like communicate from way over there, with ILM during this whole process too. So he's shooting Schindler's List, which is not, I'm sure, like a very heavy time of shooting. But like 4 times a week, he's doing like a teleconference with ILM while they're working on this CGI stuff. And he's traveling to Paris on weekends to meet with Reitzman to review reels in a studio. So like, and he talks about how in hindsight, he like never would have like bifurcated his attention like that. Is just terrible.
But even then he that's it. So I hadn't read that part, but it's interesting that he thinks that he kind of shirked his responsibility a little bit.
I don't know if it's like, I mean, he was like a workaholic. Like he's just like pumping stuff out all the time, producing and directing. But I wrote down this quote to kind of like clarify what he meant. So he said, quote, "The whole year became kind of like a fever dream in a strange sense. I think I used every ounce of intuition making Schindler's List, and I think I used every ounce of craft to make Jurassic Park. And I think somewhere inside my brain there was a small nuclear explosion. Those final months are very blurry to me. I don't have a lot of real lucid memory to share of what happened in those final months of post on Jurassic Park," unquote. So he's talking to the people making the making of doc, like the interviewers, trying to like ask him about those final months, and he's saying like, I really don't remember. I just, my brain was just like shot. I was like, which is, I don't know, it's just incredible. At one point, Kathleen Kennedy talks about how like incredible of like an organizer of stuff he was to be able to like do all that at the same time. Really incredible. And I mean, if you think about like Jurassic Park comes out in the summer and Schindler's List comes out in the winter of the same year, 1993. Like, has there ever been like a bigger year for a director than that in the history of film? I don't think so. Like Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, let's run through the rest of this.
Just to
go ahead
real quick on the thing. I had to look it up because I was really excited. In 1993 is when the Pentium processor came out, and it had a whopping 60 megahertz of processing power. So now we're in the gigahertz, we're in the thousands of hertz.
Yeah.
And like the one I have now has like I think it's got 8 cores, but it thinks it has 12 cores, and they're all running at like 5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
So like the fact that they were able to do all that kind of crazy stuff. Woof.
I mean, they got 3 rooms of them, of the server, so
that's just cool. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
yeah,
I saw that and it's just like, I was like, whoa.
That's wild. Come a long way. Yeah, so Jurassic Park releases in the US on June 11th, 1993. I wasn't even 2 yet. I turned 2 in July.
I was 8.
This came out. So I was a wee, almost 2-year-old when this movie came out. But it released in 2,404 theaters. So a big, huge opening for this movie. One of the cool things about this is when Spielberg was working on this, he had met with Terry Beard, who had founded Dolby Theater Systems, DTS, that you might recognize.
Yep.
he founded that in 1990. He had worked in the business for like 20 years before that. And he did a demo of their 6-channel digital sound process for Spielberg, who like absolutely loved it. And he was so convinced of it that he convinced Universal to invest $4 million to equip 1,000 theaters with DTS. So 1,000 of those theaters had this brand new digital sound system in them, which I think was really cool.
It's interesting the movie theater, the production company Universal was doing that, and it's like other production companies are going to get the benefit of it.
Oh yeah.
But that's pretty crazy too.
Oh yeah. So it opens up. So I think the budget was like 63 million is what I saw my research. It opened up to a $50 million opening weekend, which is huge for this time. Within 9 days, it exceeded 100 million. I mean, these days, like you can get a big $100 million opening weekend. But like with inflation, 50 million opening is like way more than that. It opened up worldwide. It broke box office records in Asia and Europe and Australia. And eventually climbs up to $914 million worldwide box office. Highest of all time. It held that highest grossing movie of all time until 1997 when Titanic broke that record. Do you know what held the record before Jurassic Park?
Was it Star Wars?
No. Something else broke Star Wars' record.
Was it Terminator? No. Was it India? No. I'm not sure.
E.T.
Oh.
He broke his own record. I'm double checking that as I speak because I'm pretty sure in my memory. So it became, so it was 1977 was Star Wars, and then in 83 E.T. broke it, and then he broke his own record with Jurassic Park in 93. So it was 10 years he held it, and then he held it for another 4 years until James Cameron broke it with Titanic.
And then he took it again with Avatar.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, 50 million in 1993 is worth almost 109 million today.
Yeah. So I mean, big stuff.
So it was a pretty epic, and especially the fact that it only cost 63 million to make, or I guess nowadays.
I think with re-releases, it's now up to $1.1 billion gross. So it's had it had a big 20th and 30th anniversary re-releases in theaters.
Yeah.
So those kind of start adding to that worldwide gross. So Spielberg walks away with $250 million from the gross profits.
Well,
and you could say he was underpaid, maybe even. So he walked away feeling pretty good, I'm sure. As far as the reception of the movie goes, the critics were absolutely unanimous on one point, which we probably can guess, is that the special effects were absolutely incredible and stunning. And this quote from Rolling Stone says, "You won't believe your eyes." And they go on to talk about how the special effects was art in and of itself, and that the special effects guys are the real stars of the film, which we kind of talked about earlier. Empire magazine called it a miracle. Everyone thought the special effects were incredible, rightly so. There was a consensus on the characters that it seems like critics weren't huge fans of the characters. They felt like rough sketches, broad stroke characters. In Variety, this critic even wrote, "In fact, the monsters are far more convincing than the humans." Which to be fair, that Variety article was like otherwise very enthusiastic about the movie. It's not
Yeah.
like they were just bashing it. But yeah, it seems like a lot of critics felt like the characters were kind of broad stroke characters. I feel like there's a degree to which that's true, but I feel like it doesn't, it's not going for these deep, complex characters necessarily.
Right.
Like it's not really that kind of movie. So that doesn't really bother me. Um,
Yeah, because you have
I don't
the
really hold that sort of thing against a movie like this because I'm like, what are you really expecting? Like with these, with, I mean, it's a dinosaur like thriller adventure movie. Like, what do you
right.
kind of really expect? I don't know.
I think I think part of it, the monsters or the dinosaurs were so crazy, like, whoa, this is so cool. And you're just like, you kind of put the acting
Yeah.
and everything to the side.
Sure.
But I think that's part of what they were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't supposed to be let's learn about how Grant was a kid and he learned to like dinosaurs. He's made fun of. It was about, hey, there's dinosaurs here. But it also kind of follows the way the book did with it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
the book doesn't get into the
even
life stories of everyone all the time.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and even like the Roger Ebert, who is a critic that I really respect and enjoy, he was kind of harsh on the movie. Surprisingly, he was a defender of Spielberg usually, but he kind of talked about how the dinosaur embryo theft stuff was like worthy of a sitcom. He didn't really feel like that belonged in the movie, and then he kind of talked about like not feeling the same sense of wonder as he had with other Spielberg films, which I find, I guess that's kind of in the eye of the beholder kind of thing. Because I still felt it like in this movie, like watching it now, I still feel it. So,
Yeah.
Agree to disagree. I can't tell him, yes, you do feel wonder. It's like, well, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he just didn't. That's fine.
I felt more wonder with Jurassic Park than I did with E.T. There's not anything bad about E.T., but just for me, like, I think it's just the grandeur of everything.
I felt
cooler
more
than
emotion
Little
with
Alien
E.T.
Man.
I'll say that.
Huh?
I feel more emotions with E.T. I'll say that.
I think E.T. is more emotional
yeah,
of a movie.
and maybe that's
like,
kind
in
of what
terms
he's
of
talking
wonder.
about.
Huh?
And maybe that he like relates his emotion to wonder like more strictly. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, there's one of the more severe takes was in the Chicago Tribune. They said that the Crichton novel was already a recycling of the film Westworld, which was written in '73 and directed by Crichton that we talked about. In that movie, there's a theme park of Wild West robots that descends into chaos. And I guess they felt like it was just the same thing again with dinosaurs instead of Wild West robots.
Is that the one that's in their TV show nowadays? Based on it's called Westworld.
It is.
I think there are robots.
It might be based on
Spoiler.
it. I don't know.
Maybe.
I've never seen either of them, the series or the movie, so I couldn't tell you.
Hmm.
I do know that Christopher Nolan's brother Jonathan is one of the main like writers for the series, but that's all I really know about it. And then some people kind of talked about how the structure of the movie was like very similar to Jaws, and like the raptor stalking stuff is very similar to Alien, and it was basically like a lot of people felt like it lacked a lot of originality as far as the story goes. I mean, sure, it recycles the story, but that's the kind of movie it is. It's not like trying to be innovative in its story. It's trying to tell like kind of a classic thrilling adventure story. So again,
and there's only so many ways that you can have like something which is more powerful stalking something that's weaker.
Yeah.
Like, and an Alien did it very well, and so of course we're going to compare it to it, but you've got to be able to have something stalking something else and it be kind of so. In some ways, I kind of think of it like the hero's journey. Like you've got that same general archetype, but they do it differently, and I think that they do it. He does it fine.
Yeah, but it is what it is. There's obviously, like, people liked this movie, made a ton of money. Most of
Yep.
the critics, like, again, like, were praising the special effects. You know, it was an exciting movie. Um, it did get 3 Oscar nominations, and won all 3 for sound effects editing, and for visual effects. So all very well deserved.
Absolutely agree.
The score, I was like, man, the score didn't get nominated, but it's because they nominated Williams' score for Schindler's List. So
Oh, okay.
what are
Well,
you gonna do? You know?
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I mean that's it. As Jurassic Park, there's it's kind of ironic. There's that insert shot of panning through the gift shop in the movie, and it's like, yeah, this film turned into a merchandise like machine. You know, you have all of your stuff back there in the background.
Yeah.
I mean, it's turned into a multi-billion-dollar franchise once
Oh,
you
for
add
sure.
in the Jurassic World movies. So yeah, just huge, huge, huge franchise, huge deal. But yeah, that's. Let's move. I guess we can transition now into some of the key points. One of
Okay.
the like critical reception things that I didn't mention that I figured would lead us into this was that the New York Times article on the movie criticized Spielberg for watering down the tone of the novel. So I figured we could kind of start on talking about like what are the things we like from the novel that weren't in the book, or maybe like what are some things we like that he changed that works well
Yeah.
for the movie. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the film versus the novel?
So if we get so in the book, and when I first read it, it was shortly after the movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Hammond dies in the way that with the compies, like what happened in the
Yeah.
opening scene of The Lost World. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me was like really, that was a lot.
Yeah. Isn't it a little girl?
In The Lost World, it's a little girl.
Yeah, so that's how the book opens too. There's a little girl that gets bitten by compies in the towards the beginning of the novel, I think too. It's like one of the kind of setup scenes in the novel.
Yeah.
Like
So
maybe
we kind of know that not everything
in
was
the
right.
prologue or something. Yeah.
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 But when Hammond did it, like he was like, "Hey, buddy," you know, all that kind of stuff, and then they
Yeah.
just turned on him, and they ate him, and he did you put in your notes, the novel was much more brutal. It was very kind of brutal in the way that they did that, and that was, and I just remember that was very haunting to me.
Well, I mean, in the book, like at the beginning, when in the prologue, when it's like setting up all the stuff that's like happening, like, I mean, there's, I think it's the compies are like stealing babies out of homes in Costa Rica,
like dingoes in a way.
Yeah, it's like it's very, very brutal, like what's going on and stuff, and they, you know, it's the introduction to the worker, like you have the worker that's been bitten by a raptor, you know, you kind of figure out like, oh, this dude's got a raptor attack. And the guy that brings him to the hospital on the mainland's like, oh no, it was a construction accident. And the doctor lady's like, I can tell this, like she's thinking to herself like, no, this is definitely a laceration from a like animal.
Right.
And so there's a lot of stuff like that, and that kind of gets like brushed under the rug in the novel until finally like things descend into chaos. And you know, there's a key line in the film that I think is like a key thing in the book that you know, so the chaos theory thing is like a much more big thing in the book, like Malcolm's whole chaos theory, which the Malcolm character is pretty different, I feel like, from the novel to the film. He's a much more serious, like, dude in the book.
Yes.
he is, I think, in both the voice of reason, but in the film that it comes across better. In the novel, he's kind of like, oh man, Malcolm, would you like lighten up a little bit? Like
Yeah.
he's just like very pessimistic. Um, but yeah, so the whole chaos theory thing, and then there's the line in the film where he says like, "You never had control of it." That's the
Yes.
illusion, is that you ever had control, and so that's a big thing in the book. And I feel like the book is a much more like brutal and scathing critique on like unfettered progress and unfettered capitalism,
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. And the movie, all of that is way, way, way watered down. So I think that New York Times article is right. Like he does water down the tone of the novel a ton, but I get, and this is where we can talk about like, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing or is it just different? And I think it's the latter at the end of the day. It's just different. It's
It is.
it's a different interpretation on the story, and the tone, I guess.
I would say that I think it's a good thing that he did that. Because the book's like 500 pages or something like that. It's a lot to go through, and you need you need that kind of nuance that the book can go through that
Mhm.
you don't necessarily have in the movie.
Yeah.
And if Hammond was the same way he was there, if Malcolm was the same way he was in the movie, he wouldn't be as likable. And if in the movie, like the movie, it's separated from everything, whereas it's not as separated in from the real world in the book.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that we really wouldn't be. You almost kind of root for the dinosaurs in reading
Yeah.
the book with some of the things
Yeah.
that happen, because it's like these people are bad.
Yeah. Well, like, I think the big difference is it goes back to like when Spielberg wanted to make this movie, he wanted to make it for a wide audience.
Yeah,
And the novel just isn't for kids. It's not a kid's book.
it's
it's
not.
it's a very adult book with adult ideas. Like, I mean, the introduction to the book is like an examination of like the basically like the evils of scientific progress when it's like when there's no like moral considerations,
Yeah,
like in play, like it yeah, it's and so like that's like the introduction to the book. And when I listened to it on audio book, so when I was listening I was like, ooh, I'm gonna like this book. So when that was the introduction. But anyways, it's just this movie, Jurassic Park, has those ideas kind of in the background. Like they're
yeah,
there if you want to find them, but also like it can be just enjoyed as like this adventure thriller that a kid could just like have a good time with and like
yeah,
get scared by, but like, everything's okay at the end of the day. Um, as far as we know, when they leave, I mean, all the dinosaurs are still there.
yeah,
It's not like it's not like it went away. But it is so there is that sense of like it is very open ended at the end, but it does have like that happy ending kind of feel with the way they look at each other and stuff. But
yeah. We get
anyways,
out, and I think the other thing is they were able to, like, even at the very opening scene when the thing's in there, he's like, shoot her, and
yeah,
the guy gets like grabbed in there, and he's like, and the hand is like being, going through the arm
yeah,
and stuff
yeah,
like that. We can see the struggle and the brutality of everything
hmm,
without having to see it. And like I
yeah,
remember in the book,
oh yeah,
um,
it describes it.
yeah, with the raptor claw like digging into the guy's chest,
Yeah,
and
it's
and
rough.
so
It would be an R-rated movie for sure if you like had the scenes in the book
yeah.
directly translated to the movie.
And then I
Um,
think even with Hammond, like it talked about the Comfy's like peeling the skin off of his body, if I
mhm.
remember right.
Yeah, because I think it's maybe Malcolm wakes up and yeah, they're like working on his skin, and he like, oh, it's gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just like the book is for adults. It's digging deeper into those themes of like the chaos theory and the unfettered capitalism and unfettered scientific progress, and
Yeah.
digging into those a lot more. This has those ideas in the background. They're still there, but it
Mhm.
is like you just go back to Steven Spielberg talking about what he wanted to do. He wanted to bring dinosaurs alongside humans and have people see that, and like that was like the main goal, and he accomplished that at the end of the day. And that stuff is there in the background if you want to find it and think about it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is a movie for everyone. It's like for kids and for adults, and so it's just different.
I think the
Now-
only way that he
I was just gonna say now, and would I be interested in watching the very adult, very brutal version of this film that's closer to the book? Yeah, I think I would, because I really enjoyed the book. I think the book is really good.
Yeah.
So, but I really like this version of it. So
I wonder how. I don't think they could. Well, I guess they could. That would be interesting to see if they would try to do that. Oops. I would say the only other thing that Spielberg could have done, if he would have left Jurassic Park to another director, would have been to do like the Dinotopia series, where you can have like humans and dinosaurs together. So I think
yeah, I don't really know.
But-
Is that Is that a book series or something?
it's a book series. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
It takes
anything
place
about
in a alternate dimension kind of ish,
and
there's humans and there's dinosaurs and they talk, and people ride on the triceratops instead of like oxen to plow fields, and then there's dinosaurs talking like, hey buddy, how's so it's very different, but I think that this is more grounded in like a reality type thing, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably go on for a while about the novel and the differences and
Yeah.
stuff. There's a good bit of differences. The
And the
basic
game,
the basic structure is there.
yes,
From novel to film, but yeah.
we
Were you
had
saying
the
something
game
about the
warden
game?
survive, which makes sense.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, the game warden survives.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which makes sense because like it's kind of in the movie. I guess it's like, okay, he's been watching these raptors. He should know how they work.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of like a self-sacrifice thing in the movie of like,
Oh,
I'm going to charge in and know that they're going to come after me so that you can get to the the main breakers or whatever.
I never thought of it like that, but that totally
Yeah.
makes sense now.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, one of the big things about this movie obviously is it's a technological revolution in certain ways. The limits CGI was limited. That's probably actually I think probably enhanced the film. And we can talk about that as we go, but really, like, if you think about this, it's one of the only movies of its time where people watching this in theaters when this came out could genuinely say, like, I've never seen anything like this before. I can't believe what I'm seeing on screen. And that's a big deal, like, because there's a lot of movies made, and there's, and so to be in 1993, like, nearly 100 years into the Hollywood industry, like, and for people to be saying, wow, I can't believe what I'm seeing. It kind of like has that feel of like people seeing motion pictures for the first time, and the wonder of it. People had never seen a dinosaur that looks real and like looks like it's in our real world on screen before. Like that's hard to compute for people now that weren't, around for that to experience that. But yeah, I mean, it was totally new. It was it was like I said, a technological revolution. And
8-year-old
it
me had his
changes the
mind blown.
industry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really, really incredible.
Hello there, listener. Don't you ever want more for your life? Don't you ever dream of surpassing the status of just podcast listener? Well, I've got good news. If you head on over to establishingshotpod.com and click the send a voicemail button on the right side of your screen, you can be featured on the podcast. I'd love to hear from you, whether it's a comment in response to an episode you liked, an opinion of mine you disagreed with, or just a question for me. And if you're too shy to have your voice featured, you can always email me at establishingshotpod@gmail.com. Don't settle for just being a podcast listener. Reach for the stars and get featured on The Establishing Shot. Back to the show.
Yeah, some Spielberg distinctives. I don't know if this is a part that I think I like to go through and talk about all the things that Spielberg does that I see in each movie recurring. But I don't know. Did you notice any? I don't know. I'm watching Spielberg movies constantly right now, so I don't know if other people notice these things as much as I do. But I don't know. Did you see anything that was like, oh, this is totally Spielberg?
I think I'd kind of noticed one of you put it as a bullet point as well, but the use of humor to kind of stop like really intense scenes.
Sure.
But it wasn't humor that was like, derp derp.
Yeah.
It was just like a comment that was made or something that was, of course I can't think of anything now, but even just like with when Malcolm is hurt and he's on there and the T-Rex and it's like object closer than in the mirror.
Yeah, that's great.
That was must go faster, like all that kind of stuff. It was like it made sense, but it wasn't over the top and it didn't seem forced, and
gives you a good little chuckle,
Yeah, just enough to like break up the intensity. Almost like in or something completely different. How in Passion of the Christ with Mel Gibson, you had the moments while Jesus was being tortured to they go, oh hey, I made a table. Just something to give your brain kind of like, or your brain kind of a break.
Sure.
Like I thought that kind of stuff was really he did a really good job, and that brings back to one of the reasons why I love The Last Crusade so much, is because that had that kind of thing, and it wasn't too much, and I feel like almost he got better with it over time.
Yeah,
because there were some campy stuff in Last Crusade that wasn't in this one, and there's in the we talked about the sense of wonder with the people. I almost how like about how Grant was kind of like a Spielberg type character, that sense of wonder. I think that was really important, and the chemistry with everyone. So I guess the final distinctive this moment is the fact that the score matched what was on the thing.
Oh yeah,
there was
absolutely.
a perfect amount of not preordaining, but they would set up and then pay off. Like later in the movie. And then just the way that like I said, the use of humor through stuff I think was a really well done.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think he does get better. I think what it is he figures out how to work with his writers to get the humor in there. Because the best example of like Spielberg trying to do humor and it just like being terrible because he's not like a comedic director and storyteller is 1941, which I think is just an awful movie. This reminds me, like you said, of the indie movies. They're just like well placed and well timed, like kind of throwaway jokes to break tension, to lighten up the tone a little bit. And it does feel like an indie movie a lot of times, just because it is a bit of an adventure movie in a
Yeah.
way. And then like the tone, the way he breaks up like the serious and the action with like bits of like humor is yeah, it helps a lot. It feels like an indie movie in that way.
Like in the one with the tree and the kid, and like, you know, they get out of the car, and then the car falls back on him, and like,
Yeah.
well, we're back in the car again.
Yeah.
Like that, just it's so, and it's
Yeah.
perfect for like how a kid would act with things.
Yeah. One of my favorite jokes was when they're like, he's just talking about like, oh, it's, you know, like a Disney park ride. And Malcolm's like, yeah, but at the end of the ride, but there's not a chance that the Pirates of the Caribbean, the pirates are going to jump out and eat the people.
Right.
Like, that's a great joke.
And
then
then
I also really like where he's like, Malcolm is saying, going through like the, you know, God creates the dinosaur, God destroys the dinosaur, God creates man, man creates dinosaur, and then Ellie's like, dinosaur eats man, woman rules the rules the earth. I'm like, oh, that's great.
It is. And then like the way that Goldblum, or what's it, Malcolm, he kind of reacted to that. I was like, oh, I guess you're right. And I think that Malcolm kind of did I love the laugh. I love the Malcolm laugh so much. But even down to things like to humanize him as well with the humor, like when Grant goes to buckle his seatbelt and can't do it. It wasn't, and he goes and he tries to do it and it's not working, and then you have everyone trying to help him, and then he's like, I can't, and it's not working, so he finally just ties it, and then but before he does that, Hammond's like, well, you know, we'd have landed by the time you get it done. Like just all that kind of stuff, it just plays in, so it's very real humor.
And
I think that was and it, like I said, it made sense. How was it? But then also, I think the other thing that was very much of a distinctive, I don't think you have it in here, but just it was very well paced.
Yeah.
We had enough time in the beginning to kind of get into the world before everything went bad. And there's not like a moment there, like even when he's talking with the when Hammond is talking with Ellie, and talking about the flea circus, like even that doesn't seem boring or just like, oh, it's just a random guy talking about stuff. Like it's what our bodies and mind need after that scene.
Yeah, and I think building on that point, like it's that, but even more than that, it's these moments of slowing down to have character development. And that's something Spielberg has always been like really good at, is having these slow down moments in between the action where there's some character development going on. So you have like that scene with Ellie and Hammond. He's it's kind of dawning on him what's going on, what he's done. It's a big character development moment, and it slows down the movie and the pace to like fit that in. The other one that really hit me this time, like emotionally, was when Grant is in the tree with the kids, and they're looking out and seeing all the brachiosaurs, and they're having a little moment. The kids are like sleeping on him, and it's like this. He's thought for his whole life like he hates kids and he doesn't want them, and it's like you see on his face this moment dawn on him of like, oh, kids can bring more a new dynamic of meaning to your life. And like that actually, like, that's probably the most emotionally resonant moment for me in the whole movie on this rewatch. And it's this moment of like in between this like intense, fast-paced action, slowing down, having a character moment. And I feel like that's something that is missing in a lot of like movies, like summer blockbusters today. Like this, is these moments to slow down and have some real like strong character moments. with the characters and developing them. So I
And not
really
just like a joke, not just for them to prove how great they are at something. It's just a real to humanize. And because like even with the part with Hammond and Ellie, like he's still convinced. We get to see his conviction that he's
Yeah.
doing it for the right reasons amidst all of the marketing and propaganda and stuff like that. And that's where she's like she calls him out.
Yeah.
But I think it's appropriate the way that she's calling him out,
Yeah.
not just to belittle him, but to be like, hey, you got to wake up. Like there's something wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just we're not just dealing with fleas. I think is
And it's
is what she
earned,
says.
yeah.
These aren't fleas.
Yeah, it's an earned moment between the two.
Yeah.
Two also. Yeah.
Oh, and then sorry, how Malcolm kind of switches from comic relief, laying there, with his shirt, everything that, to like when Hammond's trying to lead the way, and then Malcolm's like, "Look, just let me do this. Hey, do you see the pipes up there? Go to the pipes, and then go over here." And like that was, I think I don't think there's a lot of wasted people in Spielberg movies.
No, yeah, and I think this movie is especially so. Like all of the characters have something to do.
Yeah.
And they have enough moments where you understand that character's purpose in the movie. And what they're supposed to be doing, what they're good at, why it's important for that character to be the one doing it. Yeah, all of that is there, and that comes from just like really good writing, really.
Mm-hmm.
So props to David Koepp for the screenplay here. And Spielberg worked in close tandem with him, so a lot of that comes from Spielberg too. But yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. The only other Spielberg distinctives I have were like more like camera work stuff. So he loves to have someone step into a close up from out of frame. Like if you have Hammond step in, and a couple of different. I think he does it for like Welcome to Jurassic Park. He steps into the camera into close up. It's a big thing that Spielberg does. And then of course like lots of like shadow working and reflections and stuff in this movie, which Spielberg does a lot of. So
like when you have the raptor get into in the behind the raptor and the painting.
Yeah, I love that.
And then
That's
even
great.
before that, when Lex is like holding the Jello and the Jello shaking in the like that's such a good scene too. It's very iconic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about a lot of this. I usually ask for intriguing images or sequences or things that stand out. We've really talked about all of these. I will say the one thing that we haven't talked about, because we talked about the Brachiosaurus reveal, we talked about Grant and the kids in the tree, the trick of the reflection with Lex. The one thing that I had noted that we haven't talked about is, and this could be, you could say this is a Spielberg distinction too. He's very good at tension building. I absolutely love the way he juxtaposes Ellie working to do something that you want her to accomplish, which is get the power grid back on, and them getting over the electric fence, and you have Tim still on the fence as she's getting to the switches, and then there's extra steps. Okay, let's get this kid off. I love that tension building and jumping back and forth because she's not doing something that you wish she wasn't doing. Like you want her to do that, but you also want this kid off the fence, and it's just great tension. And then one thing about Spielberg too, that I really, really like is if this movie was made by someone else today, because it's made in a way that like it's supposed to be friendly to kids, he would not have gotten shocked off of that thing and had to be like CPR'd back to life. He would have gotten off the fence safe. Last moment, he would have gotten off.
Yeah.
But Spielberg he respects kids to be able to handle something that's frightening. And getting shocked off a fence and having to be CPR'd back to life is very frightening. But he trusts kids to be able to handle that. and to experience that. And I think that's something that he does very well, is like kids can handle fear, and it's actually
Yeah.
like good for them to like experience that in this way. So I really, really loved everything about that whole like juxtaposed sequence of tension building.
Yeah, and in watching it this time, I think I felt a lot more of the tension as she's like going through and like push the button and just going
Yeah.
down, and then she's
Yes.
and then he's like, I'm gonna go up, and then no, don't go up again. And then he's like, and then right as the kid's deciding to do things,
Yeah. One,
then it
two.
hits it,
It's
and
like
he gets shocked off.
yeah.
Um, and it's kind of done funnily, but it's not funny.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
I
which
get
is
what you
good.
mean. Yeah.
And I
In the moment, it's not funny.
yeah
But like if you like think back on it, it's kind of a comical situation.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I guess.
And then
Yeah.
like the way that Grant then makes a comment about his hair and
Mhm.
stuff like that. It's showing that
To break the tension, he's understanding how to interact with kids now. And
exactly.
yeah, for sure.
I think in you also you talked about some quibbles with the one guy doing the programming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had mentioned that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get to with Nedry and like the dude's talking about sparing no expense, but then
Yeah.
that's Nedry's big thing is like,
and I
when
almost
he has
wonder if
the
Nedry's just super greedy though.
he's
Like,
super what?
super greedy.
Yes.
I think that's more it than like Hammond hasn't paid him well, because I mean, this dude obviously, I don't know. Arnold isn't complaining about not getting paid well, so like, I think maybe it's just a Nedry thing.
That is fair.
And now that I'm thinking about it, maybe he's not the only one doing the programming, because isn't there like a team somewhere else that they call at some point? So maybe he's just the one on location, but there's like a team of programmers somewhere else.
They had talked about to that they were sending people away, off the thing, and that it was a kind of like a skeleton crew type thing at this
Yeah.
time. So I think he might have just been, but even so, to not have additional people that they could
Yeah.
contact with the thing. So I think that is a fair gripe.
Yeah. And
but it is just interesting
the way it works in the book is there is like a team, but this one guy, he talks about how like, oh, when you're a programmer, you like program certain things into your code so that you can always like get back and do what you want if you want to.
Get that back door.
Yeah. That's kind of how it happens in the book.
I think but it is just interesting how you have the everywhere spared no expense, but then he's the only guy that they talk about not doing. I think the other thing, another intriguing sequence. I think the way that I think the whole thing with, so we find out with Hammond and Ellie that the freezers doesn't have any power, stuff like that, and things were melting, and they can have it. So he's got all these ice cream, and then the kids go there and they're eating all the ice cream and just having fun with that, and that kind of distracts them. Then they go into the kitchen, and all of that stuff you don't think about, and then when the little kid does and is like running into the freezer, the raptor only slips because everything had become frozen, or all the frozen stuff had started melting. Then the raptor slips, and then they're able to lock him in there.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really good sequence. So because there's no way like the kids are going to be able to like lock them into the door or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then so I thought that was really cool. But I think the anyway, we can go some. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like
Yeah, and Spielberg too, he talked about how he didn't want the kids to be attacked in the jungle.
Yeah.
He wanted them to be attacked in a place where it felt more like familiar, like home.
Mhm.
So like inside of a building in a kitchen, is a little bit more scary for a
Yeah.
kid because
I think,
you're being attacked somewhere that's supposed to be familiar and supposed to be safe, but it's not.
and that's where
Um,
the, yeah. Ooh,
yeah.
that's interesting.
But yeah. Let's
Oh,
talk.
sorry. One last thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go for it.
The he left us. I thought that was so. I thought that was really cool. How like he left us, but I'm not
Oh
gonna
yeah.
leave you. I thought such a good line.
Oh yeah. I know.
Um,
Yeah, Grant's line.
yeah, and just how you're dealing with them feeling abandoned, and that's a very
Mhm.
kid-like thing to do.
Yeah.
And then Grant had to lie a little bit. I have to leave for a little bit, but I'm gonna come back. And I think that type of it's almost like a life lesson, so to speak, for
Mhm.
hey, people are gonna leave, but you're gonna find there is someone who doesn't leave, and there is,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not always as black and white as you think it is.
Sure. Yeah.
So, anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there into like there's just to kind of like round it out. Like, I mean, the T-Rex attack is the T-Rex reveal and attack is just like iconic, incredible, fantastic. We haven't like talked a ton about it other than like the special effects stuff, but yeah, just everything about it is the slow reveal. It's just not like, oh, here's the dinosaur, you have the goat, and then the goat's gone, and
yes,
then you see kind of like him through some leaves, and then finally like there he is, he's coming through the gate. Like everything is just so good. My
and you
only
got the leg.
quibble with that whole scene is like, really, this girl can't turn off a flashlight? Like,
Yeah,
she can't figure out how to turn off a flashlight. Like, that's a little
and
bit
then
ridiculous, but it is what it is. It's still, I mean, just a phenomenal scene. If you had to like pick one scene to keep from the whole movie, it would probably be that whole sequence, I would think.
just with the kids being attacked and the flinging the light thing, or the whole T-Rex attack. I think the T-Rex
Oh,
attack's important.
the whole T-Rex, like the whole from them realizing the goat's gone all the way through like the chase, like that whole, like the T-Rex chasing the Jeep.
I don't know. I think that's pretty important.
What do you mean very important?
I think just because so without that, there's like no T-Rex in the movie.
No, I'm saying if you had to pick one scene, like if there was one most important scene in the movie, like you throw away the rest of the movie and you can only pick one scene to keep, it would be that scene.
I
That would
thought
be
you
the
were
scene to
saying
keep.
which one would you throw out?
No, which one
And
would
I was
you
like, no, that's a
keep
really
out of
important scene.
all the scenes in the whole movie? I would say like
Yeah.
that is the most like exciting, well crafted through and through. Like
Yeah, the whole
and
thing.
it's just another way of saying I think that's probably the best scene of the movie.
I agree. And even with the because it has a little bit of everything. The only thing that I think is kind of wonky with it is you go from, oh, there's a goat, and then the cars are seemingly in the same place, and then now it's like a 40-foot drop. Like where is the drop in it, and how is he? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Are you talking about the drop of the goat?
No. So you have the goat, and then that's like on eye level with everyone.
Oh,
and then there's that like now they're on like the top of a wall that has like a 40-foot drop, and like where is that? Because it seems like that's.
I didn't really think about that until just now. Honestly, I don't know. I would have to watch the scene again to see if like the part of the wall they're on is a different than where the goat was. That's the only thing I can think of.
Because the T-Rex, because it's eating and it drops the lamb chop onto
Yeah.
the kid's
Jeep,
car,
yeah.
and the kid's car is the one that gets pushed off, but then it gets pushed off in the tree. But
yeah,
think
I know what you mean. I just hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it just now.
the fact that we hadn't done that, I think, speaks to to him.
Yeah.
To the way that like we're just so caught up in it. But yeah, I agree. That is definitely by far the most iconic, the best
Yeah.
scene. And even with Malcolm, like where he, the Grant throws the thing, the T-Rex is about to go there, and then Malcolm tries in his own way to be like, hey guys, I'm
Yeah.
over.
Well, yeah, it's like he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's gonna try to be. I do like that that was actually Goldblum's idea. He was like, "What if I distract the dinosaur?" And Spielberg's like, "Yeah, sure, let's go for it." He did it. So, yeah, he wanted to make his character a little bit more heroic, I guess.
Little did he know.
Yeah,
and then he paid for it, and he introduced chaos into it,
yeah,
which I thought was
absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah. Talking about characters, we've already actually hit on most of this stuff. I did want to touch on Ellie.
Yeah.
I feel like she's a really, really great character. First of all, Laura Dern, we already talked about how incredible she does with this part. And you kind of touched on this earlier, but what I love about this character and the way Laura Dern plays her is she has like a full feminine vision. Like she's not just like, oh, I'm really enjoying like Malcolm's like flirty kind of
Yeah.
way of explaining chaos theory, because she does. And she's not only like crying over seeing a triceratops, which she does,
Right.
and it makes me almost want to cry about seeing the triceratops, seeing her cry about it.
Yeah.
And same thing with the brachiosaurus. She has this tear like coming down when she's like seeing the brachiosaurus for the first time, which is, and it's just like so like incredibly touching. So she's got that, and then she just like basically goes like full badass woman, like
Yeah.
at the end, like doing what she needs to do. But she's also like screaming because the raptors are scary, like.
Yeah.
But she's also like facing that fear. So she's just like, I just love that she's a full complex character. She's not one thing.
Yeah.
Like she's all the things. It's kind of it reminds me of a reason I really enjoyed the Wonder Woman movie. Because she was like, she's Wonder Woman, but she also like can fall in love and can feel like emotion and care for people, but also like rip you apart if she needs to, like she's a full, like, I feel like for a long time in Hollywood, and it still happens some today, is like women characters get reduced to a singular trait.
Yes.
And so when you come across like a character like this in a 1993 film, and she's like a full complex character that isn't one singular trait, it's just like, I just love to see that,
Yeah. And because nowadays it's either like, it's either random sex object or the bestest ever.
Yeah.
Better than everything. So
or it's like she's just action hero, like she's just doing the same thing male action heroes do, and
yeah.
she doesn't feel any emotion, and that's like, you get that some too, and it's like, well, that's not true either, like.
Right, you need real people.
Yeah.
Because like she and I think part of it is when she goes, so after she escapes from turning the power on and she sees Grant just randomly standing there, and she's like, run, and like trying to convince herself to run for that last little bit of energy, like that is such, because it shows that like she's not the superhuman person.
Mm-hmm.
She's got to convince herself. I think we've all been there where like we see our destination there and we are tired, we are out of it, and we just have to convince ourselves to just get to that final point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was such an important thing, because then it rehumanized her after it showed that she was still human, even though she was able to escape the raptors
Yeah.
going in there when other people weren't. But that wasn't. But that was believable because it was like she burst of adrenaline going. The raptors were kind of playing with her. The raptors were also focused on Molden.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you remember. So it all kind of flows. But then there's just that little extra. Hey, she's also still a human.
Yeah.
And then like you had talked about the being an earned moment in talking with Hammond. Like you take that versus General Holdo chewing out the pilot. Like that doesn't seem as much of an earned moment.
Mm.
And I forgot the pilot's name. Anyway, from The Last Jedi. But so like you've got there's two things where she's chewing someone out, but in the one it seems more earned because we've spent that time with her, we've gotten to do that, and so she's able to do things that typically, like back in the 90s, were more reserved for the man. The man was going to be the one that like told the guy off and stuff like that, and she did it, and it made sense because I totally believe that's what her character would do.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
And I think that's great. And then we're for sure about Malcolm switching up.
Yeah. He becomes the useless, sexy bimbo at the end. He does give the advice about following the pipes, so it's not like total, but I mean, he's laying there useless with his shirt open, like instead
so
of
ridiculous.
It being the typical like position where you might see a woman. Unfortunately, right?
Right.
You know, they put a Goldblum in instead. Yeah, great. And there he is now on your shelf behind you in Funko Pop form. I
won't take that one, but yeah.
Yeah. Hammond, John Hammond, I did want to touch on like the change from, you know, we mentioned in the book, it does feel more like a con man, kind of in the book than he does.
Almost like a
much more sympathetic here.
But Barnum Bailey.
Yeah.
He's more like a P.T. Barnum in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, you sympathize with him a lot more here, and my only question is like, should we need to sympathize with him more? Like, I don't know, there's a degree to which I'm like, you know, Spielberg is great at like humanizing people and all that kind of stuff, but there's a sense in which like there needs to be, I guess it's like my one tiny little quibble with the movie. I think I touched on it earlier, talking about if the Nedry character was maybe different, more nefarious instead of goofy, or maybe if John Hammond was more like he is in the book.
Yeah,
there needs to be someone that at the end of the movie is to blame, and it feels a bit like they're trying to get away with like, oh, no one's really like at fault here, it just went wrong, when at the end of the day, like, yes, someone is to blame here and someone should be held responsible for this. And it just feels like at the end of the movie you're supposed to feel sorry for Hammond instead of like saying, no, you need to be like, you know, tried and put in jail or something, you know, for what you've done, you know. So that's like my only one thing with the movie that I'm like, it I don't know. It doesn't sit right that like no one is to blame in the movie, because in the book that's not the case at all.
Right.
In the book, it's like, yeah, the people that are to blame like get their just desserts at the end of the day.
That's very fair.
But again,
but I think
it doesn't. That's a small thing. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I love this movie, and so
yeah,
it's just one small, tiny little thing, because at the end of the day, the movie's not trying to be that necessarily. I just kind of like wish it had it. If that makes sense.
I do think it makes sense. And I also think that we kind of we see him repent. well, I don't know why I was about to roll my R's. We see him kind of repent.
Yeah.
As he begins to see all this stuff. I think it's harder to be hard on him when during the eating part where they're eating the thing and the lawyer's like, "Oh, we can have coupon day." And he's like, "No, I want everyone. I don't want people to be held back by the money. I want everyone to be able to experience." And like at that point, we're kind of like, okay, so he is doing altruistic. Then we find out it isn't. It's kind of ego altruism, and that's
Yeah.
when Ellie calls him out. And
Mhm.
then at the very end, when Grant's like, "Mr. Hammond, I cannot endorse this park," and he's like, "Neither can I," and is like
Yeah.
zipping along. It's like
That's one of the more corny lines, but
that is yes. But it can mostly slide under the radar. But it also goes to human. Like, hey, he knows what he did was wrong,
Yeah.
and let's get out of it. And I
Yeah.
think that's
I guess my thing is like I agree with that, but I just feel like the movie doesn't hold him responsible.
Yeah.
Like just because you have realized the error of your ways and wish you hadn't done it doesn't mean you shouldn't be held responsible for, the consequences of your actions. And so that's
I think
like I
that
said,
happens more in the second and third movie. The second movie.
it's been a long time. I don't remember anything about the second movie. So
He's
I
like on
do
his
know
deathbed.
he's in it.
Yeah, he's like maybe not on his deathbed, but he slowly died. He's not doing well. His company's been taken over because he's lost everything,
Yeah.
and that's why he like tries to get Dr. Malcolm to like, hey, dinosaurs, I want you to. No one can go on that island, and people are trying to do it.
Yeah.
And so we kind of see that he is more reformed. He did lose everything. But then I think the second one is more about evil corporation versus
I'm really interested to revisit that one because I don't remember anything about the second or third movies. So
when it comes time, I'll volunteer as tribute.
Yeah. I have it scheduled. I have it on the schedule with someone. So
okay. Well, good.
But yeah, I guess like we've really talked about all the things. I guess for final thoughts, I wanted to talk about how there's sort of a bit of a meta commentary on the film industry in this. We talked about like the former ways of filmmaking becoming more and more extinct in a way. That was a joke that Spielberg and his special effects guy made amongst themselves that made its way into the movie. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because there is a bit of do Spielberg and the team ask, can we and not should we? And this movie is a technological revolution. It breaks CGI into the film industry. And it's like, yeah, we can, but should we? What are going to be the results of this? And the restraint of and limits of CGI at this time really helped this movie work.
Yes.
We've talked about
100%.
all the reasons why. This movie had around 60, give or take, CGI shots, and that's it.
Wow.
And another thing I didn't point out earlier is there's only like 15 minutes of dinosaur footage in this movie, which you would never guess. So
wow.
When you add up all the shots where a dinosaur is in frame, it's only like 15 minutes. It's kind of that Jaws kind of thing,
Yeah.
But anyways, there's only 60 CGI shots in here in Jurassic Park. By the time the Phantom Menace comes around, there's like 2,000 CGI shots in the Phantom Menace. And really, like the average for a blockbuster movie like this today is 2,000 to 3,000 CGI shots.
Wow.
And I think movies are worse off because of that.
Agreed.
It's just, I don't know. The success of this movie is just as much about what they didn't do as what they did do. But a lot of that comes from just the limitations they were dealing with at the time.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of many films today. Many films today don't work because they just do everything. They don't ask what are the things that we shouldn't do and should leave out. They just like, well, we can do everything, so let's just do everything.
Yeah, like I
And
think there was this. It was a what was it? It was a Disney Plus show. It had Nick Fury in it, and or Samuel Jackson, Nick Fury, and
yeah,
like I remember seeing a still from it, and like they didn't even have a prop gun; they had a CGI gun.
yeah,
Like so, he was just holding like a stick that then they put the gun on top of it. And it's like that is was way over the top of what's needed on there. And then you're putting the CGI guys. There's only so many of them, and I mean you kind of look at you look at what happened like Pirates of the Caribbean with the Davy Jones and his squiggly things, and you compare that to like nowadays in like a modern Marvel movie, especially the Doctor Strange with the eyeball on his forehead,
yeah,
where it just looks terrible. Um, and it's because I think they're relying too much on that because there's so
right,
many shots being done and remakes and all this other kind of stuff, and like and I think like you had said, I think but I but in the same way, I think what they did was perfectly appropriate and
yeah,
almost the ideal of what should be done.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
and that's why I say it's like it's almost ends up being like a meta commentary because it's
yeah,
like, um, it's it goes back to the line of I think it's Malcolm that says it of like the illusion is that you ever had control of this in the first place because
I think that was Ellie.
yeah, maybe it was
When
Ellie that
we
said
have
that.
control, you
Yeah.
never had control.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so that's the illusion, and I think that's what ends up happening with CGI. It's like, well, we have control over this, we're going to use it in the right way, but then once it's out there, like you can't control it anymore, and
yeah,
it changes the industry. And we'll probably see something very similar with AI. Like once someone starts using it and figuring out what they can do with it, and once it's out there, like it's going to change everything. And
yeah,
a lot of times when that happens, like you lose something that makes that art special.
yeah.
And CGI is a great technical. It's not quite a one-to-one with creating dinosaurs, recreating dinosaurs because
Right.
it's not dangerous. It's just does it make
Well,
does it it's a question of it goes back to the can we and should we.
yeah,
You have to
that was a
ask
Malcolm line.
Yeah, you have to ask that of each and every movie. Like, can we do CGI? Yes. Should we? Well, should we in some scenes? Yeah, because like you can see in the 60 frame, 60 shots that they used in this movie, it was great. It was incredible.
Yeah,
It was enhanced by the times they didn't use it.
right.
But I feel like a lot of movies today are the opposite. It's just like, can we? Yes, let's do it. It's not can we, should we? And so that second question has been completely lost.
I
And
agree.
yeah, it's just unfortunate. I don't know. But
And I think
anyways,
like one of the great things about when Disney bought Star Wars is they're doing more practical effects. And I think that strengthened it in some areas. I'll just say real quick hitting on AI. I think we're kind of in the spot where they were with CGI. Like there's some cool things that you can do it to help like storyboard easier. Let me just
sure.
get a picture of this. Like someone who's not artistic could create their storyboard and be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But then you got some people who responsibly use it to like, hey, help me with this prompt. But then you've got people who might submit like an entire script or a part of their script or whatever that's
Yeah,
written by AI. And it doesn't make sense because there's no human. That's not how humans talk.
right.
So like I do one of the things I've been doing on the side is AI training where like I get someone puts in a prompt and then I evaluate the two responses, and there's a lot of times where I'll evaluate someone's like, tell me a story about a cat that whatever. And so I'll evaluate it, and sometimes like this was a really good thing, and other times it's like, oh, that's you don't know what these words mean, and like you're
Yeah.
just going over here. And so, but then there were a couple times where it was like I got to create the prompt, and I was like, tell me about a world where there is, and I plugged in my ideas, like dragons that live underwater and stuff like that. And it was like, oh yeah, the dragons live underwater and they communicate through making sound waves like dolphins. I've never thought about dragons communicating like dolphins. And it's like, that's pretty cool. I'm not going to use that because I want to go a different way with it. But like, if I hadn't already thought of the way I wanted them to communicate, that could have been really a cool way to do stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's about tempering things.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's a good
about
interesting balance.
restraint and
Yes.
knowing, you keeping control over the tool instead of letting the tool control like you.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing with and especially with art. Like when you're creating art, like the tool should never inform the art. It should always be the other way around. The art,
that's a good point.
the art uses the tool for its purposes, not like we have this tool so we might as well use it. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of something that I felt like was interesting to kind of end with as a final thought. As far as Jurassic Park goes, love it. It's a great movie. I think I have it as of now. It's like my number 4 favorite Spielberg as I've been working through. So it's I slotted it in right above Last Crusade. So it's a close. I could go either way, honestly. There, Jurassic Park any given day might switch to 5 under Last Crusade, but yeah, I still like Jaws as my favorite, and E.T. and I have another movie that I haven't gotten to yet in the series that I think is better. That may or may not be coming up next. But Is this your favorite?
It is my favorite. It's almost. I can't say movie without as an individual movie, standalone, nothing else. I would say that this is arguably my favorite movie of all time.
That's fair. Totally fair.
There is a special place for Requiem for a Dream, but that's not a movie that I. Oh,
you don't want to watch that all the time.
Yeah, I watched it twice, 3 times, and I've never watched it again. But it's such a powerful movie, kind of left that effect. But this was one that I think I want to go and watch on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Not as much as like Lord of the Rings trilogy, but this is definitely up as a single stand-up. But I think the Lord of the Rings one needs all 3 of them, arguably.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I would say it's near perfection on in movie, the production, the writing, like as a whole package.
Yeah.
I think it is definitely up there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great one. It's just a good time. And like I said, it's got those kind of underlying themes of hubris of man and whatnot going on.
And it calls it out without being preachy.
Yeah, you could say that's a typical theme for a movie like this, but that's fine. Yeah.
Not everyone does it as well.
Yeah. But yeah, love this movie. That's all really I think we have on Jurassic Park, though. It's probably not all we have on Jurassic Park, but it's all we have for this episode for today.
Yes.
So
we will we'll stop ourselves.
We'll let it be for now. Yep. But we have a related movie draft coming up next week. Christian will be joining me for that. We're gonna do a movies where science goes wrong draft. Science gone wrong movie draft. So obviously this falls into that category. It'll be kind of like, I guess, the main honorable mention, the Jurassic Park Memorial Draft, I guess is another name for this one. But
I dig it.
And then the week after that, we'll be digging into Spielberg's other 1993 movie, in Schindler's List. So that's what's coming up the next couple of weeks. Christian, why don't you tell people the best places to follow you and what you're doing, especially with Dancing Fox? Yeah. Where should they go?
I'm still working to create it. Hopefully by the time this airs, dancingfox.studio will be up and running, so you guys can learn a little bit more about me and storytelling and some of the stories that I tell, as well as and I'm looking to have a review thing up, and then hopefully a podcast that can get Eli on board, so y'all can pressure him to do that kind of stuff. You can follow me on Twitter, Dancing Fox on X, or Twitter/X. All the socials should be dancingfox.studio, Facebook, Instagram. I am working on that kind of stuff. I finally got back from my graphic artist who got me a picture of my dancing fox. So I'm very excited to debut that. That's for the review portion of Dancing Fox Studio, which is called the Fox Den. And so hopefully that'll be up sooner rather than later. Just depends on my life. But thank you, Eli, for having me. I really appreciate it. This, like I said, my favorite Spielberg movie. I got to do my top 2.
Yes, and possibly favorite of all time. So
yes, so I really appreciate that. And as always, I love being on here because I get to learn stuff.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have thought.
I learned it too. I learn it myself and then I share it. So I love doing that. But yeah, I'll make sure to link all those in the episode notes so people can just open that up in the episode description and click the links. But that is all we have for this week. So look forward to the draft next week. But until then, for Eli Price and Christiaan Funkhouser, you have been listening to The Establishing Shot. We'll see you next time.
We were happy here. For a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.